Are you a researcher looking for the next step in your career? Euraccess is the European Commission's research portal that you will want to visit. By joining Euraccess, you can connect with renowned universities, research organizations, and businesses all around Europe. Available at your fingertips are thousands of jobs, funding, and hosting opportunities in all research fields and for all researcher profiles. Once you have found the offer suiting you the most, follow the instructions on where to apply. Access is easy, whereas registration is free and comes with a lot of benefits. Create your profile today, look for partners, or make your CV available to recruiters. Looking for support when relocating for your research project? The Euraccess Centres provide you and your family with free information and personalised assistance. Whether you want to know more about European research policy, funding, or further collaboration opportunities, Euraccess Worldwide helps you interact on a global scale, while the 40 Euraccess national portals provide country-specific, practical advice and information. And Euraccess isn't just for researchers. If you're an entrepreneur or business, you get access to the world's greatest scientific minds, as well as the opportunity to hire, fund, or host them. Or maybe you're part of a research organization or university. Euraccess lets you post your vacancies, look through CVs, and create partnerships. Wait, that's not all. Whether you are a recent graduate, professor, entrepreneur, or a journalist, our policy library offers you access to policy papers, R&D reports, and research facts. Basically, everything you need to keep your research in motion. Don't waste more time. Join Euraccess today and take your research career to the next level.
Good morning from Brussels and good afternoon to all of you there in Southeast Asia. My name is Jenny Almaco. I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Susan Renzo Vasu. We are in Women in Science and Research, Minding and Bridging the Gap, a roundtable discussion as part of the 14th Share Policy Dialogue. As we know, science and gender equality are both vital for the achievement of the internationally agreed development goals, including the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. However, today, just 30% of researchers worldwide are women, and only 35% of researchers, of all students enrolled in STEM-related fields of study are women. Yet, women and girls are continuing their contributions to innovation and groundbreaking research. So, Susan, some people still give the argument that the academe and research historically has been the province of men. But I think perhaps this is just because we need to discuss a little bit more, and we really have to capture, women from the very beginning who have created an ecosystem that provides for women to take the reins and to really lead. And this is the reason why we are here today. But before I hand over to you, Susan, I would like to thank the SHARE program, CIMEO REHED, the UNESCO Asia and Pacific Regional Bureau for Education, the ASEAN Secretariat's Education, Youth, and Sports Division, the ASEAN University Network, and other partners for this session today. We celebrate today female leaders in the frontiers of science, research, innovation, and we hope that they continue to inspire the next generation to follow their footsteps. Susan, please.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jenny. And this is exactly what Jenny and I, as Euraccess ASEAN, are doing here in the region. As you've seen in the trailer at the beginning of this session, we are part of a European project that is called Euraccess. And we're hoping to be your gateway to research collaboration with your partners across the European Union, across the European research area, and in fact worldwide. And of course, the topic that we're discussing today, the role of women and girls in science and innovation, and how we can help them fulfill their potential and thrive, that is very important, and that's what we're dedicating the next hour and a half or so, together with you, to hopefully find some ideas and solutions. And I think that leaves me to introduce to you the very first speaker that we have lined up for you today. And it is no other than the ambassador of the European Union to Singapore. It is Her Excellency Ivona Piorko, who began her term as European Union ambassador to Singapore on the 1st of September 2021. In the midst of the pandemic, she arrived in Southeast Asia, and luckily we're now seeing that everything is finally coming back to normal a little bit. Now, Ambassador Piorko is a seasoned and highly accomplished diplomat. Before her assignment in Singapore, she held several positions in Brussels in the European Commission, most recently as member of Cabinet of the European Commission, Executive Vice President for Europe Fit for the Digital Age, Margrethe Vestager. In that role, she oversaw a portfolio that included industrial policy, SME strategy, internal market trade, e-government, as well as coordination with the European Union Council of Ministers. She was also previously head of international affairs at the European Commission's Directorate General for Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs. She was member of cabinet of the EU's foreign policy chief, Federica Mogherini, and from 2010 to 2014, she was member of cabinet of Commissioner for Enlargement and European Neighbourhood Policy, Stefan Füle. So she has a very rich background as a European diplomat, and I'm sure she's going to draw on that in her welcome speech in a few minutes. And with that, it is my honor to introduce you all to Ambassador Ivona Piorko. Ambassador Piorko, the floor is yours.
Thank you for this very, very kind introduction. Too kind, as introductions tend to be. It really is my pleasure and honor, really, to open this webinar today. Well, you've mentioned, before I start more officially, you've mentioned that I was privileged to work at least with two very known female leaders, Federica Mogherini and Margrethe Vestager. So I definitely owe it to all women I meet to share this experience of female leadership that I simply had the pleasure to indeed witness. But I'm also very much in company of women at my workplace, because it's most women, including Isabella, who works with you in the area of research. So I really would like, first of all, to thank all of you and my own team for preparation of this webinar. Now, I am, as I said, really honored and happy to open an event that whose main theme is so much close to my heart: women in science and research, minding and bridging, more importantly, the gap, organized by two EU initiatives, EURACSES ASEAN and SHARE. And this is really as part of SHARE 14 policy dialogue. The subject is very important. I think everybody that is online watching definitely agrees with this. It is a pleasure also for me as EU ambassador to see SHARE and EURACSES addressing it together, because these are two really important initiatives for the EU in this region. SHARE is doing a great job in bringing together stakeholders and developing strategies for further higher education. And as you already described, and also we saw on the film, EURACSES is really a unique pan-European tool to support researchers and raise awareness on funding opportunities, which are obviously there to help. I cannot and do not want not to mention the most important thing, which is on our minds very constantly these days, and this is the Russian aggression against Ukraine. But I'll do it in a way that shows you how much research can do to help also such tragic moments. Indeed, war has come back to European continent, and not only, because this is really a conflict with consequences to the whole world, including very much Asia. And it's costing innocent people's lives and destroying dreams, we hope not for long. And we in the EU, but also our partners, including Singapore, where we are, at least I am now, are doing everything we can to both bring peace, help bringing peace, and supporting those that suffer now, both in Ukraine and outside the 4 million refugees by now. And the research community has very quickly shown also how it can help also in such moments. And the European Union has launched a one-stop platform to support researchers from Ukraine, the European Research Area for Ukraine, ERA for Ukraine. And that portal has been made available on Euraccess website, for which I really thank and congratulate colleagues that have been behind this. This allows Ukrainian researchers to access information on funding opportunities and stay connected with the global community wherever they are now. Coming back to the subject of today, but it's linked, science and research are positive forces for society, positive forces for change. And we as policymakers have the responsibility to grow a community of researchers, and that definitely includes, well, at least half of population, gender equality. You've given already some statistics here about the fact, how women scientists are changing the world by pioneering research in various areas, but still the percentages are not where they should be. We see wonderful research in biomedical science, breakthroughs in neuropsychology, leading international research excellence centers by women. But as we discussed, and you gave some numbers, these numbers are not satisfactory. Not only in research, it's the same in peacemaking, in business, and so on. But definitely in research is also the case. Just to give one of studies to add to the statistics, we in the EU last November published a report, She Figures, on data on women in research and science, and I understand one of you will be giving more details on that. But just to mention some key sectors like ICT or engineering, we see the representation of women doctoral graduates, for instance, in ICT is only 22%. That's really, not enough, and progress is definitely needed there. I'm sure you are also going to discuss the reasons, the challenges, how to do something about them. They are very complex as always. It's never black and white. So this is, of course, lack of models. I was, privileged enough to have some, but not everybody had that luck. And I think we all, as I started, ought to, at our, modest functions and places, really try to help young girls in any way we can. Of course, there are also perceived and real difficulties in reconciling private and professional life. And I remember some discussions I had with women in STEM here in Singapore, who explained to me that in research, especially STEM, it's even more difficult than in other areas, because in other areas, when you go out of your professional life for a year or two, you can catch up rather quickly, whereas apparently developments in tech, for instance, are so quick that this challenge is more complicated. So maybe something also to analyze deeper. In any case, there are also stereotypes, and these I really think we should fight against together with all force and determination. And I think one of our main messages should be that this is not a problem for women only. We are in an open way, losing talent and growth opportunities for our entire societies. It's obvious that to solve the biggest challenges of our time, we need to tap to every resource we have, and that should be obvious to all. I'd like to mention our biggest in the world, actually, research program, Horizon Europe. This is 95.5 billion euro, and I'm really happy that it's a program that puts gender equality at its core. For the first time, it includes eligibility criteria. So to receive EU funding, one needs to basically have gender equality plan in place. This is for institutions, organizations, and other applicants. And as you know, Horizon Europe is open to association to third countries. And we really hope that Singapore is going to consider this possibility. Many countries got themselves associated already. Singapore is still in thinking mode, so we hope that will happen as well. So to recap and to really listen more to your ideas, as you are really specialist in this, I shall say that gender equality is at the core of EU action in more general terms, of course, not only in research, in all our cooperation with partners worldwide, including in ASEAN. This is obviously also linked to implementation of UN sustainability, sustainable development goals, as you said in the beginning. But there is one area where we see that the inclusion of gender in formal agreements, work program, and so on, is still lacking, dynamism. And I think this is an area clearly for improvement. So one of ideas of how to bridge the gap, which is at the core of your thinking and of your discussion today. That leads me really with just thanking you once again for having me to open this debate, and I'm really happy to be able to at least listen to the beginning. Then I have to rush off to other activities. But I wish you very good discussions, and I'll follow closely the results of your discussions. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Piorko, for a powerful start to our discussion today. Her Excellency has shared to us some statistics and, of course, also the actions of the European Commission on really making sure that we have gender-responsive policies in science and research. Thank you so much, Ambassador. I want to add to your statistics. There's an analysis of nearly 3 million computer science papers published between 1970 and 2018. And it concluded that gender parity would not be reached in this field until the year 2100. So that's something that we have to work on together, especially since, as you said, Ambassador, women have been at the forefront of science and technology, but there is this risk that if we still have this gender imbalance, then women will remain a minority. So the European Commission, as you said, is committing to promote gender equality in research and innovation. I myself, Ambassador, is a recipient of this, having been an Erasmus scholar and a Marie Curie alumni as well. And to talk about this a bit more, Ambassador, I know that you have other things to do. Thank you so much for joining us. So we will allow you to slip out if you have to. But I wanted to also share to you that we have invited Ms. Marina Stareva, from the head of the gender sector in DG Research and Innovation of the European Commission. Unfortunately, Ambassador, she has fallen ill, but we are happy that she has a replacement. Well, nobody can replace her as a person, but just for this discussion, we are honored to have the Senior Policy Officer of the Gender Sector of the Directorate General of Research and Innovation of the European Commission, Dr. Anne Pepal. Thank you so much for joining us today. The virtual floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. Yes, indeed, Mina Stareva is really sorry. She cannot make it today, and she has asked me to replace her. So I will try to do my best to convey the messages that she wanted to share with you. Very happy to be here. So should I start my presentation now, or? Can I have the slides? Oh, thank you. Thank you. So yes, I'll try to give you an overview of our latest developments in the policy for gender equality in research and innovation. But first, and already Ambassador Piorko mentioned this, I will try to give you a few key figures taken, next slide please, from our well, next one, from our She Figures 2021 publication. This is a pan-European statistical booklet that we publish every 3 years, and it gives the state of play on women's representation throughout studies and the career path, but also looks at other indicators. And a few pointers here, some have already been mentioned. While we've reached overall almost parity among PhD graduates, all disciplines considered, it varies very much and in the STEM fields, for example, in information communication technology, this has been hinted to earlier, only 22% of women. In education, 66% of women. When we look higher in the career path, so grade A positions, and that means full professorship or equivalence, only 26% of women. That's still a slight increase from 3 years ago, but it's still less than 30%. And as heads of institution in the higher education sector, 24% of women. These figures are overall from 2018, 2019, just to specify this. When we look at scientific boards at national level, less than a third of women as board leaders and as board members. Even a higher underrepresentation in innovation. Around 10% women among the patent applications that are submitted. And if we look at another aspect, which is how much of the scientific publication take into account a gender dimension. So take sex, biological attributes, or socio-cultural aspects, gender, as variables in the design, in the content of the research that is produced and reported upon. This is still very low at EU level, but also globally, so less than 2%. If you want, you will have the slides later, and we have the full report, also an interactive website and some policy briefs, including one on women in the STEM fields. Next slide, please. The overall policy framework, and this has also already been mentioned, is the European Research Area, which since 2012 has set as one of the core priority gender equality and gender mainstreaming in research, with 3 underpinning objectives: gender equality in scientific careers at all levels, gender balance in decision-making, bodies and position, and what I just explained briefly, the integration of the gender dimension into research and innovation content, so sex and gender analysis, with one common approach to achieve this objective, which is institutional change at national level through national action plans, but also at institutional level, supported through the implementation of gender equality plans in higher education, research organization, and public bodies as well. As the She Figures 2021 have shown, there is some slow progress, but there are still persisting gender inequalities in the European research and innovation system. And I've already highlighted some key issues. Gender-based violence in organization is also something that has been under considered, let's say, but is now much more under observation. And next slide, please. There is also a need to open gender equality policies to more inclusiveness, and at 3 levels, looking at intersections between gender and other social categories such as ethnicity, sexual orientation, disability, so intersectionality, but also looking at sectorial inclusiveness, better involving the private sector and the innovation partners, and also the geographical inclusiveness, making sure that everybody in the European Research Area, the widening countries, are also included in this process. And the Commission, to advance on these challenges, has adopted a new communication on the new European Research Area, which sets as one of the key actions to develop with member states and stakeholders inclusive gender equality plans and policies. Another key document, and I think it's very relevant for this audience, is the communication on the global approach, which was adopted in May 2021, and which clearly underlines the need to mainstream and integrate the gender dimension into international cooperation through dialogues with non-EU countries, and to foster as best as possible gender balance, inclusiveness, diversity in a broader sense into research and innovation at a global level. Next slide, please. So this is a document by the Commission, but this approach is very much supported by the member states. And in last November, a package of key documents was adopted by the Council with a Pact for Research and Innovation in Europe, some Council conclusion on the future governance of the European research area, and with a very important document, an annex to these Council conclusion, the ERA policy agenda for 2022-2024, which has a specific dedicated action to the promotion of gender equality and fostering gender inclusiveness, taking note of the Ljubljana Declaration. This declaration, which was spearheaded by the Slovenian presidency of the Council of the EU in the previous semester, was endorsed by 25 out of the 27 member states, by a majority of the associated countries, and by the Commission itself, and really sets a roadmap of priorities to be addressed and which member states and the signatories are committing to. I should also underline that this ERA policy agenda has also a specific action number 9, on international cooperation. And actually the first standing working group in the structure that will be following at operational level, the implementation of this ERA policy agenda, the ERA Forum, the first standing working group is on international cooperation. Next slide, please. So to come back to Action 5, there are 4 key interlinked deliverables. I won't detail them too much, just highlighting that 2 of them are very much on the policy approach for inclusive gender equality, on the policy coordination, on how to implement gender mainstreaming, including in the other actions, so Action 9 on international cooperation 2, and 2 are more specific on gender-based violence and on involving research funding organization, and making sure that the gender dimension is integrated in programs, and also that there is mitigation and less potential gender biases in research assessment. Next slide, please. This approach and the gender mainstreaming approach was also built on what we have developed in Horizon 2020, and there is a specific project under the Science with and for Society work program, which is called Gender and STI, aimed at developing a gender perspective in bilateral and multilateral dialogues with third countries in science, technology, and innovation. And you can see here the 10 international partners. There are also some EU partners. None are from Southeast Asia, actually, but this project also has as a task to open as much as possible to a global approach. Next slide, please. Now, Horizon Europe. The new ERA builds on those strengthened provision introduced in Horizon Europe. Next slide, please. So, as already stated, there's really a strengthening in this new framework program that's enshrined in the legal basis, and you can see that at 3 different levels. The gender equality plan, which becomes an eligibility criterion for certain types of organization, and I will focus on this one, but I also want to mention that the integration of the gender dimension in research and innovation content that I highlighted earlier is now mandatory throughout the program in all the different work program parts, unless it's specified that it's not relevant for a specific topic. Another key level is gender balance within research teams, and this is now a ranking criterion for proposal with the same scores, and that holds for any type of a topic in Horizon Europe. Next slide. The Gender Equality Plan, as stated, is now a mandatory, a requirement, eligibility criterion for public bodies, research organization, higher education institution from member state and associated countries. So this does not apply to most of the organization, actually to all of your countries, as far as I understand from ASEAN, unless Singapore becomes an associated country, in which case, indeed, organization from Singapore will need to have a gender equality plan to participate in Horizon Europe. Next slide, please. What we ask for in those gender equality plans are quite basic, mandatory, process-related requirements that this gender equality plan, which sets out targets and actions to address the situation in the organization, should be a formal document signed by the top management, published on the website, and also very well known and disseminated in the organization. You should have dedicated resources to implement the actions in the gender equality plan. It should be evidence-based, so built on sex and/or gender desegregated data and regularly reported upon. And you should build capacity, train on gender equality in research and innovation issues, including on unconscious gender biases and stereotypes that were mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. And we recommend that these 5 content areas be addressed. And this is very much a consensus of key domains that should be addressed, that we defined through co-creation with a large amount of stakeholders and experts. And these 5 areas are work-life balance and organizational culture, gender balance in leadership and decision-making, gender equality in recruitment and career progression, the integration of the gender dimensions to the content of research and teaching when you are a teaching institution, and measures, again, gender-based violence and sexual harassment. Next slide, please. We also offer support through different schemes, mainly now to member state and associated countries, but there are funding opportunities. Some are still open until the 20th of April on the Living Lab for Gender Responsive Innovation, and a support scheme for less advanced organization from widening countries to implement inclusive gender equality plan. And we will also have a gender equality competence facility, a prize for gender equality champions. Some of these you can apply to, and there will be more coming up in the 2023 and 2024 work program. Next slide, and I'm almost done. Some useful resources. Next slide. Our website on gender equality in R&I policy, regularly updated, and really I invite you to check it out. Next slide. Also, this was mentioned before, well, Euraccess offers were mentioned, and in the framework of the Marie Sklodowska-Curie action, there are novelties in the new work programs. There are some global postdoctoral fellowships that you can access, and a few things that I wanted to highlight that are improvements with respect to the previous Marie Sklodowska-Curie action in Horizon 2020 is opening more the family allowances, which can be accessible throughout a project. Also, some long-term leave allowances for different situations, and more support to families in cross-border situation. And by families, we have an inclusive understanding of families, which also covers same-sex, LGBTIQ families. So, and so this is might be of interest to some of you. And I'm almost done. Next slide, please. I am done. So I'll be happy to answer questions. I hope I wasn't too long. And thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Pepin. I think that's already given us a lot to start the discussion on. I think it was very heartening, I think, to hear the Commission's commitment, recognizing the importance of gender inclusiveness. And as you said, also the importance of engaging dialogue partners such as ASEAN, for example, in in a conversation on how we can jointly foster gender inclusiveness in international scientific cooperation. And I'm very glad that as Euraxis ASEAN, we're playing a role today in bringing, two key players, the European Commission and the ASEAN Secretariat together, and then together with our fantastic panelists to kind of look at some of the issues that you've already put on the table. And I was particularly very happy to hear about the MSCA and how it is changing the family allowance, the broader definition of what family entails. Of course, we've just heard that I think over 1,100 new fellows have joined the MSCA family. And Jenny and I know that quite a few are from ASEAN, so we're very happy that they also get to benefit from these new developments. I think it is now time to we have a question, actually. Maybe we should, Jenny, we can ask Dr. Pepin one question, if you don't mind, if we have time quickly.
Yes,
and the question is from Nadia Metoui, and she's asking, I'm wondering about the disparities on country level in the EU about these last points. Maybe you want to just add a few comments on that.
So I'm not sure about which last points Nadia Metoui is referring to, but of course there are disparities across EU countries, definitely. In the uptake of gender equality plan, in what is covered, and indeed in the proportion of women in different fields, in a grade A position, so full professorship, there are important disparities across the EU.
I think Nadia was referring specifically to the definition of family and also the allowance.
Well, the allowance, they will be the same for all. Well, there's an EU strategy that has been adopted for LGBTIQ individuals. So there is a joint approach at EU level to address this. But of course, in some countries, there's less tolerance, let's say, for these new understanding of families. But it is an EU policy.
Thank you so much. I think maybe we'll take that into the roundtable discussion in a minute, and I'm sure Anne is probably still available later on. So first of all, thank you so much. And if you allow me, I'll introduce our next speaker now, because as we said, the dialogue between international partners is extremely important on this global issue. It is an issue that affects all of us. So I'm very pleased to invite our next keynote speaker. It is Dr. Zurina Mokhtar, who works at the ASEAN Secretariat as the head of Science and Technology Division. She was previously working at the Ministry of Environment and Water of Malaysia as the Principal Assistant Secretary. Prior to that, she was the Special Officer to the Deputy Minister of Energy, Science, Technology and Climate Change, also in Malaysia, and she also served at the National Institute of Public Administration as a training consultant, where she trained more than 1,000 government officials in the area of public policy, which to me sounds like an extremely ambitious position. She holds an MPhil and a PhD from the University of Cambridge in the UK. She's also been attached to the Permanent Mission of Malaysia to the United Nations in New York and the Innovation Agency of Malaysia. She was awarded the 2018 Innovative Youth Incubator Award in Washington, D.C. So she is both a diplomat and a scientist. And I think with this, we are very excited to hear Dr. Mokhtar share her views with us. Dr. Mokhtar, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Suzanne, for the very kind introduction. Her Excellency Ambassador Ivona Piorko, EU Ambassador to Singapore, of the Gender Unit, DGRTD, European Commission, of course, Dr. Suzanne, Dr. Jenny, Regional Coordinators, Your Access ASEAN, moderator, panelists, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon from Jakarta. Thank you for inviting me to deliver a keynote in a session that will be centered around women, science, research, and gender responsiveness. Indeed, the past 2 days in shared dialogue, I think it has been really, really enriching for me. The theme chosen, the contribution of higher education partnership in Southeast Asia in achieving SDG, has definitely included voices of stakeholders, including women in science. Can I have my slide, please? All right, thank you. So it is my pleasure today to share with all of you ASEAN gender responsive experience with a special focus on acknowledging and subsequently encouraging the involvement of more ASEAN women in science and research. All right, can I have the next slide, please? Okay, to begin with, I think this is not the first time we were being presented by a long list of challenges faced by women in science. I think Ambassador Piorko and also Dr. N also covered this briefly in the remarks. So if we zoom into the ASEAN context, some of these challenges are even more pronounced and some have yet to hit us. This is mainly due to our historical background on gendered social norms, the overrepresentation of women as wives and caregivers, and underrepresentation of women in science, what used to be known as the male-dominated area. As some said, before breaking the glass ceiling, women must first climb the maternal wall, stereotypes faced by many working mothers in ASEAN. The point that I'm trying to come to here is that in order to be able to address these challenges, we need to first understand the nature and extent of this conundrum. Likewise, failure to acknowledge the gaps leads to failure in bridging it. Next, please. Okay, for us in ASEAN, although it is arguably a dire time for us to encourage more women in science, but if we step back and reflect, ASEAN women role as leaders have been actually improving significantly. Since 1940s, we have more women represented in the parliament. 6 out of 10 ASEAN member states have history of first women heading a government. Women are also being recognized for their right to vote and to stand for election. The encouraging changing role of women in ASEAN represent a commendable progress on the road to achieving socio-economic gender parity. This is truly a milestone for us. Next, please. Okay, however, in terms of women representation in the parliament, at least from the data that we have from 2 years ago, actually none of the ASEAN member states reached gender parity. The proportion of seats held by women in parliament only stands at 28%, the highest in the Philippines and Laos. But I think this is actually not surprising because even globally, the proportion of women in parliament only stands at 25%. So put succinctly, a proportion of women MPs actually increases, but parity is unfortunately still far off. Next, please. Right. On a related statistic, it is indicated that more than half ASEAN women still earn far less than their spouses, and as low as 24% women make into the middle and senior managers position. Interestingly, an analysis comparing men and women argue that women, we are more transformational in demonstrating more contingent reward behavior compared to our men counterpart. So I think this could be one of the many reasons why we should have more ASEAN women filling up a senior manager's position. Next, please. All right, now let's zoom into ASEAN women involvement in science and research. Data reveal that, except for Myanmar, more women are into arts and humanities, followed by natural sciences, medical sciences, but not so much into engineering. I think Ambassador Piorko mentioned about this. As a whole, ASEAN women and girls made strides in tertiary education enrollment, but when it comes to STEM, science, technology, engineering and mathematics, ASEAN women still need support and encouragement. In most ASEAN member states, the number of women pursuing careers in engineering, while it's actually still low, but it is generally on the rise. Next. Okay, so if we look at the share of ASEAN female researchers as compared to the male researchers, Except for, again, Myanmar and Cambodia, we can see healthy proportion of women in research, although we are still being outperformed by our male counterparts. This is an indication that for ASEAN, we have work to do before we can really close the gender gap in various areas of research. Next slide, please. All right, so I think this would be the beef of my presentation. In the light of the gender gap issue for ASEAN women in science and taking into account ASEAN diverse cultures as well as unique social landscapes, it is apparent that there is a critical need to eliminate the barriers that ASEAN women in science face. In achieving their fullest potential as scientists and researchers, these are, I would say, the tools that ASEAN Secretariat have been utilizing in helping women in science climb the maternal wall and break the prevailing glass ceiling. We have got policies and guidelines in place backed by analysis and studies. We've got declarations, frameworks, POA to formalize the intention in mainstreaming gender and the establishment of networks, discussion through dialogues, and incentive through prizes. Next. All right, speaking of declaration, earlier Dr. Ann mentioned about the Ljubljana Declaration. So in ASEAN, we've got this declaration. We stand guided by the 2017 ASEAN Declaration on the Gender Responsive Implementation of the ASEAN Community Vision 2025 and Sustainable Development Goals 2030. The declaration manifests boldly how ASEAN leaders acknowledge women as the drivers of sustainable development goals. More importantly, gender equality is recognized as a precondition for the realization of sustainable development goals. For a regional pact like ASEAN and also EU, such declarations serve as a strong member states' commitment to pursue a gender-responsive initiatives, including those of the benefit to the women in science. Next, please. Right. Similarly, on ASEAN route to recovery from the ongoing pandemic, which some ASEAN member state is now declaring as endemic, women's role has been clearly highlighted to be not just the beneficiary, but also the contributor towards ASEAN recovery framework. These include activities and active involvements of women in the recovery initiatives, like women role in science, in research, ensuring the enabling environment for women leadership, financial security for women, and many more. Next, please. Right. Now I'd like to go back a bit to the 2017 Gender Responsive Declaration. So grounded by the declaration, ASEAN had recently launched the Gender Mainstreaming Strategic Framework, proposing an implementation of gender equality commitments. This is like a POA following the declaration. This framework includes disseminating sex disaggregated data, undertaking gender analysis to inform policy making, assessing the contribution of women, encouraging women participation in decision making through various approaches. Some instances involve gender responsive leadership program, gender inclusion audit, gender inclusion procurement, gender inclusive communication policy, and many more. Of course, in ASEAN, we have got our PEGD, the Poverty Eradication and Gender Division, but that does not mean that PEGD should be the only division to shoulder gender inclusive responsibility. Rather, all sectors across ASEAN collectively support gender mainstreaming goals. If we look at the last bit down there, across all sectors in ASEAN, we support the planning, the development, and the implementation of gender mainstreaming initiatives. As we speak right now, we are drafting a plan to support gender mainstreaming specifically for ASEAN in STI. Next, please. Right, and within the ASEAN STI sphere itself, all STI-related initiatives are navigated by our APASTI, the Action Plan for Science, Technology, and Innovation, consisting of 4 trusts. I'm glad to share with you here that Women in Science is highlighted in Trust 2, enhance mobility of scientists and researchers, people-to-people connectivity, and strengthen engagement of women and youth in STI. Under the auspice of ASEAN Dialogue Partners collaboration, involving our collaboration with the EU, we implemented initiatives to strengthen ASEAN Women in Science engagement. As we go, we also learn from dialogue partners, including EU-specific best practices policies on women. For example, the obligation to have at least 30 to 40% women in STI initiative as imposed by Canada and the EU. Right, next slide, please. Okay, before I end my keynote, I'd like to share with all of you one of our annual flagship programs implemented in collaboration with the Underwriters Laboratories and USAID Ignite, the Science Prize for Women. The prize incentivizes and recognizes the role of ASEAN women scientists who have used your work to improve their respective community and have acted as role models for the other women scientists. Each year, we choose different themes, and as the co-organizer, we can see how some of these teams attract more participation compared to the other. Since inception, this project attracted and benefited more than 300 ASEAN women scientists, and many more were inspired. Next, please. All right, annually, we also organize 3-part webinar series, specifically from and for ASEAN Women in Science. Relevant issues were discussed from the perspective of women scientists and share experience from and with women in STEM across all sectors. As a result, a network of ASEAN women scientists is established, and a platform to continuously share experience and support each other is also established. Next, please. Right, I think in summary, given the different stages of development and unique culture, most ASEAN member states still have much more ground to cover in our journey towards supporting women in science, a goal that can only be achieved if it takes precedence as a national, cultural, and corporate imperative. It is actually an endeavor that takes a top-down, bottom-up, and commitment from everyone. I would like to close my keynote with this. If every country matched the progress of gender parity, global GDP could increase by 12 trillion USD in just 3 years from now. We have articulated all the gaps. What we need now is ramping our effort to bridge it for the future of ASEAN women in science and research. I think with that, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mokhtar. And once again, that was a fabulous keynote that's really given us a lot to pick up in the panel discussion in a minute. And specifically, of course, the official recognition by the ASEAN member states of the importance of gender equality as a necessary precondition for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I find this a very positive signal, but of course, as you've said, it's now up to every individual, every country, but also, every researcher and research institution to turn these political statements into reality. Also, as you said, it's of course very timely to also recognize the specific importance of women in the economic recovery of the region after the pandemic, but also I think the specific recognition of the role of women during the pandemic, which I think is something that we also will probably pick up on in the panel discussion in a minute. I would just like to now hand over the discussion to the very capable hands of our moderator today. Our moderator is Dr. Lei Ching Chai. She is an assistant professor at the Institute of Biological Sciences at the Faculty of Sciences at the University of Malaysia in Kuala Lumpur. And we've worked with Chai Ling for a very long time. She's very well known in the research community. She is currently the chair of the Young Scientists Network, the Academy of Sciences Malaysia. She's an active researcher. Her research focus is on improving the safety and security of the food system in the region. She's very active in terms of international research collaboration as well, not just with international research partners, but also with industry and government agencies. She was appointed as the scientific advisor of International Life Science Institute Southeast Asia region for her active research and her achievement in the food safety field. She's a very strong advocate, not only of gender equality, but also of research integrity. She's one of the key players in pushing for responsible conduct of research in Malaysia and the ASEAN region as a whole. She was awarded the L'Oreal UNESCO for Women in Science Malaysia Award in 2018. Now, it's my pleasure, Dr. Chai, to hand over the reins to you for the next hour or so, and for you to also please introduce the fabulous panelists that are joining us. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you, Suzanne, and thank you, Jen. Yeah, very good afternoon, everyone. So after listening, to two very, very, I think, great talk, sharing by Dr. N and Dr. Zurina. So it's really, really comforting and glad to know that there has been so much of efforts done at a higher level, at the EU and also at ASEAN, policy has been formed, various frameworks has been put up, a lot of work has been done to actually improve or to promote gender equality and gender balance, particularly in SDI area. Today we are actually very, very happy and thanks to EURAXESS ASEAN for putting up this very wonderful and fantastic platform to discuss about gender equality, gender equality and gender balance in science, in SDI and in research, and looking for ways as well as mechanisms, strategies that we actually can do, not just at the top level, but also looking at the ground, bottom level, at the ground, what we women scientists, women researcher, individual locally could do to support and to implement and as well as to bridge the gap. So we have look at in some of the statistics in EU as well as in ASEAN, the women involvement in SDI, in science, in university, in research as well. So it seems some of the country, particularly in ASEAN, so are doing quite well in terms of numbers. So the number of women involved in SDI. But are we really there already? So what are the unique challenges that we are still facing, and what do we need to do? Although a lot of policy and efforts that has already been done, but I recently read online that one of the early data and statistics shown before the pandemic hit, so we don't really see the statistic is getting better to have more women in science, but following the pandemic, so we are seeing the statistic to slide back, and a lot more women is having problem, particularly after COVID-19. Based on this early data on the effect of coronavirus pandemic on scientific publishing output, suggests that female researchers, particularly those at very early career stages, are actually the hardest hit by the pandemic over here, particularly most of the early career women researchers who are on the contract basis in their career position. So submission to preprint servers such as the RWIF so rose more quickly for male authors compared to female authors, as nations adopted social isolation measures over here. And female authors have accounted for only 1/3 of all the authors on published COVID-19 papers since January 2020. So this is a sign of the effect or the hit of pandemic to female researchers. And therefore, female researchers' position might be highly at risk due to this. So we are very, very delighted, to be joined by a stellar panel of some of the very, very active and also influential women in science from both, Europe and Southeast Asia over here with us. I will introduce, each of the panelists later on. So they will actually take some time, introduce themselves, the work that they do, as well as probably, to share with us, some of the unique challenges that they may face, as a female scientist or women in science, particularly during the pandemic time. So just a housekeeping points over here to all the participants. So you are encouraged to actually submit questions, through the online platform. And later on, so I will actually, I will ask the questions, to the panelists later. So with this, I would like to call up our first panel. over here, Dr. Nadia Mituri. Dr. Nadia Mituri is the acting chair of the Gender Equality and Diversity for Mobile Researchers in Science Working Group of the Marie Curie Alumni Association, MCAA, 2018-2020. She's an assistant professor in artificial intelligence and ethics at TU Delft. So before joining TU Delft, she was a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Amsterdam. She studied AI-enhanced communication and its impact on individuals and the society in the areas of politics, health, and commerce. She obtained her industrial PhD in computer security and privacy in 2018 from the University of Trento within the FP7 Marie Curie ITN-funded project, CERCENTIS, European Industrial Doctoral on Security and Trust on Next Generation Enterprise Information Systems, held in collaboration with the Research Foundation Fondazione Bruno Kessler and SAP Next Business and Technology. Her doctoral research focused on privacy risk-aware access control systems. She also worked as a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Milan within the research project Privacy Aware Cybersecurity, BACS. So with that, Dr. Nadia, would you like to just share, if you have a slide so you could pull it up and share a little bit of your views, of challenges that you faced during the time? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chile, for the presentation, and thank you, Susan and Jenny, for the kind invitation. Thank you to all keynotes and intervention that we just saw, amazing informations and content. So we'll start by introducing a little bit the Marie Curie Alumni Association for the audience who might not be very familiar with it. It's one of the largest research associations with close to 20,000 members of researchers who are grantees or now fellows of Marie Skłodowska-Curie Action Funds. The Gender Equity, Diversity and Inclusivity Working Group have been active since 2014 within the association. And its goals are to promote diversity in research and to empower researchers irrespective of any individual characteristic. The minding and bridging gap, the gender gap, which is our topic of today, is a central point to our activities. However, we also make sure to speak loudly about intersectionalities. So disability, education, economic levels, ethnicity, and so on are very important to mind to be able to reach this gender equality. We have two types of activities, basically. One is to investigate and raise awareness around inequalities and challenges of diverse and marginalized researchers. We have, for instance, produced a role model booklet to highlight women or to increase visibility of women in science. We organize workshops, seminars. We had video campaigns on social media to kind of, again, make more visible contributions of women and diverse researchers. The second volley is to develop solutions to boost equity and diversity. And we do this on individual, organizational, and policy levels. We heard a lot today about policy level. I'm very happy about that. But as you mentioned earlier, interventions on all levels are very important. So individuals through empowerment, training, leadership activities, communication, solving conflicts, mental health and well-being, and work-life balance. And the organizational level is to make gender equity a culture beyond compliance. So we involve project instigators and lab directors into the conversation on how but to make workplaces safe, less challenging, and more inclusive or welcoming of diverse researchers. The policy, a lot have been said, and our role, I guess, is to be intermediate between researchers, especially in early career, and policymakers, and decision makers, and we do that through consultations, meetings, and we push towards more inclusive and empowering policies through petitions. The COVID part, and please just cut me short. I tried to time, but I don't know if we are within the 3 minutes or not. Just anecdotal, I started my new position during COVID-19, and I still have not physically met all my coworkers. This made it very difficult for collaborations and even for onboarding. And I'm very curious to hear about the experience of my other co-panelists.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nadia, for the sharing. Yes, I think most of us are seeing people virtually rather than physically. So that probably would be a challenge, particularly for female, that we love to have all this human interaction and all the small talks, chit chat, that to close the relationship. Okay, thank you, Dr. Nadia. So the next panel that I would like to call up is Miss Catherine Mueller. So let me read her bio over here. So Ms. Catherine Mueller is project manager with U Multi-Rank Germany. U Multi-Rank is a multi-dimensional, user-friendly approach to international ranking of higher education institutions. U Multi-Rank is an independent ranking prepared with seed funding from the European Commission's Erasmus Plus program. Yes, Ms. Catherine, so probably you would like to introduce yourself, and the program, as well as to talk a little bit about your challenges.
Yeah, thank you first of all for the kind introduction, and thanks also for having me today. It's already at that point of the discussion I can say that it's a really enriching talk that I enjoy a lot. And yeah, my name is, as you've said, Katrin Müller. I work at the Center for Higher Education in Gütersloh, Germany, and they're in the project team for the international and multidimensional ranking U Multi-Rank. And I'm there mainly responsible for our student survey, for the coordination. Each year we survey more than 30,000 students regarding their study experience. But today I want to focus on the results of our so-called Gender Monitor, a publication that we did at the end of last year, and where we analyzed the share of women in higher education systems at different stages of the career ladder in higher education. And I just try to share my screen. Now you should see the slides. So as I've said, the results I now at my quick statement want to share with you are based on this Gender Monitor, where we, as I've said, analyzed the gender balance or imbalance for different stages of higher education careers. And if we look at the numbers on a global and overall scale, that is including all participating countries and also all participating subjects, so the numbers refer to almost 1,000 institutions worldwide in more than 80 countries, we see that for bachelor as well as for master students, the share of female students is slightly more than half of all students, but this number already decreases if we look at PhD students, a further decrease if you go to academic staff. But the most striking decrease happens if we go further to the number or the share of female professors, because as you can see, the number seen on a global scale at this stage of higher education career is only 28%. So, of course, if we go one step further, that was not part or has not been part of our Gender Monitor, but we did a several and additional analysis this year. This also, unfortunately, leads to a gender imbalance in higher education leadership positions. So the numbers you can see here refer to female rectors. Unfortunately, no Asian countries have been included here because of the data coverage. But for the countries shown, for some selected countries, we can see that, if you go one step further to this leadership level, to rectors level, then the numbers are even less promising because, for example, on European level, overall, we see that only 1/5 of all rectors in higher education are female. And even for the countries that in Europe perform above average, such as Great Britain or Germany, the numbers are not more than around 1/4 of all rectors being female. Additionally to having a look at the institutional level, in our Gender Monitor, we also had a look at the subject level. So analyzing 25 subjects and individual subjects and their numbers. And well, at the first glance, we can see what we might expect, that there are, let's say, traditional male and female dominated subjects. On the upper right corner, we see the, let's say, traditional female oriented subjects such as nursing or psychology. And on the contrary, in the lower left corner, the traditionally male dominated subjects, which are mainly from the STEM field. But what is also interesting here is that we can see that subjects that seem to be more interdisciplinarity, or seem to include more interdisciplinarity, such as, for example, environmental engineering or industrial engineering, those subjects seem to attract more women than other traditional male-dominated fields, like, for example, electrical engineering or mechanical engineering, which are the most male-dominated ones. So with those numbers, I just quickly wanted to give you a data-based insight and or a picture of the status quo that we have for female representation on the career ladder. And maybe just one short sentence to the influence of the COVID pandemic. For our work, especially, it was not such a great difference, because as we are in contact with universities worldwide, a lot of work had already been done remote before the pandemic. But of course, we see the consequences for certain areas such as internationalization, or also the contact with work environment that the pandemic puts on students and universities worldwide. And yeah, this just as the basis, as a number-based basis for the further discussion. I'm looking forward to discussing about measures with the other panelists, and to also bring in some insights from another study that we did on how universities can create a family-oriented environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Catherine. So I really look forward, to discuss a little bit more later on what university could do, to improve the environment and the ecosystems, particularly when we talk about university rankings. So this is one of the very important practice, currently in ASEAN country, that create a very competitive environment, and particularly challenging for the female, the women counterpart over here. Okay, thank you, Ms. Catherine. So next, I would like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Noor Hafiza Muhammad. So let me read her bio over here. So Dr. Noor Hafiza holds a PhD in mechanical engineering, which is one of the fields with the least women representation, specializing in laser processing from the University of Manchester, United Kingdom in 2012. She is currently an associate professor in the Faculty of Mechanical Engineering Technology, University Malaysia Perlis, UNIMAP, and also an active research fellow at the Center of Excellence in Geopolymer and Green Technology, UNIMAP. For her inspiring work in science, she was awarded the prestigious L'Oreal UNESCO National Fellowship Award in 2014. She has also won the International Gold Winner Award at the European Union Women Inventors and Innovators Network in 2015 in an event held at the British Library in London, UK. So the floor is yours, Dr. Noor Hafiza.
Hi, hello, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Associate Professor Dr. Chai Lei Ching, for the introduction, and thanks to Dr. Jani and Dr. Suzanne for the invitation. It is a great honor for me to be here amongst all of us today in our discussion. My name is Noor Hafiza Muhammad, and I work in University Malaysia Perlis in the north of Malaysia. I'm also representing the Asia Pacific Women Inventors and Innovators Network, known as UPWIND, where the spirit of this network is together all the women inventors and innovators. We focus on women empowerment, where we can inspire and also be the inspiration. So talking about gender equality, it is an aspiration that benefits of all societies, especially girls and women. So gender equality in research and innovation is achieved when men's and women's work is run by the same rules. They are both able to develop their knowledge and run under the same condition. So talking about, Dr. Che has mentioned how the pandemic affect the female researcher, and sharing from my experience, I would say that we are in the recovering phase from the COVID situation. In early 2020, as COVID outbreaks were expanding in many countries, it was affected basically because we are not able to go to work basically to the labs, being impacted by the extended university closures and sudden changes to normal operations. And then we, as a woman talking from my experience, work from home, juggling with the kids, that's some challenge. So with the movement control order and travel restriction were posed, this affected the research work, especially. We use, me and my team to travel for research collaboration for internationalizations. We have a joint international conference, but when the pandemic hit in 2020 and 2021, so we do not manage to travel. Yes, that's also impact on give the effect to our internationalization and collaboration, basically. However, I would share in the positive side, we became familiar with the digital connectivity, where we also managed to organize an international conference in online platform. That would be the other alternative. That's from the positive side that I would share, where we get the participation from local and also international participations. Another side that I would like to share is a unique challenge that we face as a female scientist. So this is from my experience as well. In early career advancement, starting a family, expecting or bearing a child at the same time, and at the same time, we're trying to maintain and try to show the exceptional productivity in balancing with work and life. So for me, this is a unique challenge that I have experienced for myself. And I think this is a unique female issues worldwide as well. Apart from research work, we also hold an administration post. So what I do for me, basically, when women, me, myself, I see another woman in a high profile position, it helps me feel stronger and keep motivated. So my advice, it is important for young scientists to observe women as mentors, speakers, and leaders in their field, which this can help to inspire and give us strength. Whatever it is, in science, I think this is a great way to help people and also contribute for a better world. And I believe we here are a kind person trying to make a difference in terms of helping people through our career. All right, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nurhafizah. It's so inspiring, listen to your talk over here. So I do agree that, particularly the young scientists, the young women scientists group, they face, a lot of unique challenges that a lot of our male counterpart, our colleagues, they won't be able to understand, the struggles and the challenge trying to prioritize and to balance. So we probably would be able to discuss a little bit more, later on. Okay, thank you, Dr. Nurhafizah. So last but not least, so I would like to invite Dr. Orakanok Phanraksa from Thailand. So Dr. Orakanok is Senior Intellectual Property Consultant at Technology Licensing Office, Technology Management Center, National Science and Technology Development Agency, NASDA, Thailand. She is also the co-chair of the ASEAN Young Scientists Network. After receiving a Bachelor of Laws from Chulalongkorn University, Thailand, Dr. Phanraksa pursued her education in the USA. She received a Master of Laws, LLM, and PhD in Laws from the University of Washington in 2000 and 2005, respectively. She is a policy specialist in the field of intellectual property law. Since 2010, she has been working closely with the Office of Higher Education Commission, OHEC, and has played a key role in forming a policy framework to promote and strengthen technology licensing officers and IP professionals in the academic institutions within Thailand. This further extends to the recent collaboration between the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, the Department of Intellectual Property, and NASDA to run a 6-year project called Enabling IP Environment in Thailand. In 2019, she was the first to be awarded the Global IP Champion Award from the Global Innovation Policy Center, US Chamber of Commerce. This award was given to 5 individuals in the field of intellectual property who are leading efforts to bring about positive changes in their communities and around the world. Apart from her professional experience in the IP space, she is the past co-chair of the Global Young Academy, GYA, a non-profit organization with 200 top young scientists from all disciplines from all over the world. So at present, she is the interim co-chair of the ASEAN Young Scientists Network. So Dr. Oh, so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chai, for your kind introduction. And also, I would like to thank the host organization for having me here, joining the panel. Can I have my slide, please? While we're waiting for my slide, I would also like to thank Dr. Mokhtar for your talk, as it could be a groundwork of my talk. When Dr. Mokhtar mentioned about minding the gap, I would like to select a few points because it would be the showcase of my talk or my sharing experience this afternoon. Dr. Mokhtar mentioned about lacking of network, lacking of role model, and unequal access to resources. And for what I, together with young scientists within ASEAN, have been working together, I would like to share with you the informal ways that we have been trying to bridge these gaps. Next slide, please. Again, I would talk a bit about our ASEAN Young Scientists Network and also the project that we explore the state of young scientists in ASEAN that was conducted in 2016, and finally a bit of selected experience of the program we have been running over the past few years. Next slide, please. Within ASEAN, there are only 5 national young academies, including Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, Philippines, and Indonesia. With these existing networks and academies, we have achieved in establishing the ASEAN Young Scientists Network in 2018. Next slide, please. Because of our collaborative efforts, despite you are males or females, we work together and we got endorsed. And because of this, we try to make things happen and work together. Next slide, please. When I was the co-chair of the Global Young Academy, there was a key project that we would like to explore the state of young scientists at the global level, but we decided to focus on a particular region first, with the first kickoff in ASEAN, funded by the Thai government and the BMBF of the German government. It was very unfortunate that we couldn't cover all countries in ASEAN. Then we focused only 4 countries in ASEAN, including Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia. The next 4 slides will only give you a kind of a glimpse of what the findings was about. Next slide, please. We explored the motivation to start academic and research early career, why scientists start their research career. Next slide, please. And we also explored about what they have satisfied with their working conditions. And for the information of the audience, among almost 500 participants of this survey, half of which are female scientists. And we also learned that they're also concerned about the job security. In particular, these are the big response from female scientists. Next slide, please. As for the obstacle that influenced the career of this group of scientists, when we talk about the topic of today's discussion, you can see from the, if you can zoom in, you can see that at the 5th slide from the bottom, gender equality is not much the concern from this project. Next slide, please. Nonetheless, we also further found that when we talk about collaboration within organization and also across the countries, gender is not much the issue because both male and females could also work together in order to produce publications. Next slide, please. But because of the fact that the survey was conducted like 7 years ago, we tried to explore further how ASEAN Young Scientists could be more impactful to scientists overall. And this is the informal way that we try to promote the SDG goal number 4, and also to showcase how we promote inclusivity, in particular the opportunities for female scientists. There are 2 key programs that I'm using this afternoon. The first one is Science Leadership Program, and the second one is the Pioneering IP program for young scientists. Next slide, please. As you can see here, there are 3 keywords: Africa, ASEAN, and APEC. We did this because we want to promote inclusivity. But later on, we found out that in ASEAN, it was not much the case from our study that women would have limited opportunity. Nonetheless, because we also want to explore more, and when we move further to APEC level, we also find out the findings of the policy partnership of the women and economy of the APEC working group. The chance of females to get training or enter into any workshops after graduation is very limited. And therefore, the group of young scientists have tried to pitch and run this program. Coming back to Dr. Chai's concern about how pandemic have affected our life, definitely you could see from the left-hand side that everything could done on site, but we have to be flexible in order to overcome with the challenge of pandemic. That's why we do it virtually online. And this August, we will be doing the on-site APEC workshop in Thailand, and we are looking forward to that. Next slide, please. And this will be a final program that I would share with you, because my profession is more to the social science and humanities. But because we see it important to promote lifelong learning for young scientists, whether you are males or females, and because if you do things formally, if you focus on certain gender, you wouldn't learn how you could mix and promote how people work together. And this is another program where I introduced my IP professional associate organization, Licensing Executive Society International, to work and do the training for young scientists in ASEAN. With that, I would like to end my talk with the last slide, which is, I believe that if you have the strong will, it will lead you to where you want to be and what you want to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oh. I really love your concluding slide on strong will. So you are well known as a strong will woman over here. So just for all of you over here, so I've known Dr. Oh for a very, very long time. So we have been working together on quite a number of projects and programs together. Thank you so much. Could we actually bring up all the panelists, so that we could have, some interesting discussion? For the audience who are listening in, so you could actually type in your questions that you would like to ask over here, and we would ask the questions to the panelists over here. Thank you. Thank you so much over here. So we have listened to all of you, your presentation, and also earlier on the presentation from Dr. Zurina, Dr. Ann on the policy. So knowing that there are so many policies already been put in place, and there is like, a lot of recognition of the issues that we face, the gender equality issue, balance issue over here. In both, I think in Europe country as well as in ASEAN, although some of the statistics show that we have more women students as well as women researchers in the beginning stage of the career pathway, but then we have a leaky pipeline that the number keep decreasing. So I would just like to ask, what is actually lacking in the current systems that is limiting, the career path of women scientists over here, both probably in EU and in ASEAN? Is there a difference? I'm just wondering, by looking at the statistic, it looks like it's quite similar, that we have higher number initially, and after that keep reducing and then decreasing. So I would just like to hear from both of you. So what is still lacking? So with all the policy that we have, is there anything that still miss out that we need to work on it? Probably Dr. Oh, yes.
I could try first as to help representing or backing from ASEAN viewpoint. I see that it's important to have certain policy to help promoting the fact that funding opportunities as well as the opportunity to access certain resources. Why so? Because we have heard from colleagues from Europe as well as in ASEAN at the policy level. But as a matter of fact, when you look at the actual system itself, only particular tier of elite colleagues who could access and be eligible to apply and get succeeded. But if you look at the majority of female scientists who are probably the majority within the region, they may have limited opportunities or even get trained. And therefore, I see that certain trainings should be more available, and also being more inclusive by, being more open to those who have less opportunity, in particular those who have, less capacity from my viewpoint. Thanks, Dr. Chai.
Thank you, Dr. Oh. Catherine, would you like to just chip in?
Yeah, I want to add a point. I think that there are different challenges at different stages. So what we, for example, see or consider as the main points is, on the one hand, the recruitment of female students especially for STEM subjects in higher education. But then in the second step, the retention or successful completion of their studies and their academic career path. And in a third step, transition to holding a job in that field. I think that at every of these 3 time points, there are different challenges and also different measures on how we can support and generate more women in this timeline. So, for example, when it comes to attract female students from high school in order that they decide for a technical subject in higher education, the measures can focus, for example, on promoting what expects them, on giving them like idols and giving them mentoring partners so that they have a clear image and that they believe in themselves that they can successfully follow that career. If we go that step further and look at the completion or the studies, then I think that academia must create a flexible environment for, because we see what I've shown, the leaky pipeline in higher education for the career levels, so that academia should provide an environment where it's feasible to combine both career prospects as well as also like caring responsibilities. And the same then applies also for the transformation or for the transition outside academia to a further job, because also then it should be made feasible for women to combine there's both sides of their lives in a flexible environment. So I'd say that it's at different stages, it's different challenges on the one side and different measures that we successfully can implement in order to foster gender equality.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Catherine, for sharing your view over here. So, is there any, Dr. Nadia? Yes.
Yeah, I echo what my co-panelist already mentioned. I would maybe just add 2 points. One is harmful stereotypes are a real mental charge on women and marginalized categories. So alleviating that by both making diversity and inclusivity a culture, again, beyond compliance and organizations are very important, by empowering them as well. And in terms of accessing, which again, my co-panelists mentioned amazingly well, accessing certain positions or even accessing at the very beginning a prospect of STEM career depends on selection and success criteria that define excellence in science, and these criteria are not inclusive yet. So making the definition of excellence in research and science and selection criteria more inclusive is also a very important point.
Yeah, I do agree with you, like, Dr. Nadia, on the stereotyping and all of these, like, the boys club that, I mean, it's quite common. I think it's like, quite serious within the academic industry, I would say. What about Dr. Nohafiza? So there's this, like, in Malaysia, when we look at our statistic, right? We do have, like, we often, like, hear people say, we do not have a problem over here in Malaysia. We are doing very well. So whenever you go into university, you see all female. So the problem right now we have, like, in terms of gender bias issue, is that we need to bring in more men into the academic rather than bring in more female, which is kind of interesting. But when we really look at, like, the statistic, like, in by the Higher Education of Malaysia in 2020, so for leadership position, like, professorship, the women professors only account for 30%, if not mistaken. So it's just that number from 56% within the whole female academician, and to professor, we only have, like, 30%, which is, like, rather low. So in your point of view, so what has gone wrong over here? Do you think that we have a problem? Or are we doing probably slightly better?
Right. Based on the statistic that you are mentioning about the statistic, and yes, in the university we rather see that more female, isn't it? And it shows the increment basically in women involvement in science. Even in my classroom, the students, we have a good number of female in the class. And in my thoughts, I would say this happened. You mentioned that we don't have the gender equality issue, which me myself, I do not face that as well. So I would say that it can be seen that Malaysia government has placed science and technology as a focus, and the government acknowledge the role of women as equal partners in building the nation. So men and women as an equal partners. So thus various policies have been formulated through the years in order to improve the status of women in all areas. And one part is the advancement of women in science. And from the questions, there are some arguments that Malaysia do not have the gender equality issues. The involvement of Malaysian women in all spheres of life has become more visible over the years. I mean, it's getting better over the years. And as for myself, with my own experience, I would say that both men and women, we enjoy the equal opportunity and access. I was given the same opportunity as well as treatment in managerial posts. For example, in the institution, women and men was given the same treatment as, for example, the position of the dean of the faculty. So we can see that over the years, various units and agencies were established to spearhead or to lead the implementation of various policies and agendas in order to improve the status of women in all areas. This is to ensure that women's voice can be heard, and gender equality will empower women to achieve to the success. Back to the professorship that you mentioned, about 30% for women. You know that there's a sort of KPI, you know, that key performance indicator that we have to achieve, and then the key performance indicator, we have to show the equal contribution with men. And I've read in the comment that we as a woman, we juggling as a mother, as a researcher, as a lecturer. So I would say that's back from the challenges that we face, and then we have to like running at the same path to achieve that. That would be one of the challenges, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nurhafiza. So I think that's quite, I do really agree with you very much. Okay. So probably like, you know, we talk so much like, you know, about having work-life balance. So particularly like, you know, for a lot of young women, so you tend to like, you know, start your careers and start your family at the same time, and you become a mother, and then you need to take maternity leave. So these actually like, you know, create a lot of issue, like, you know, particularly for like, you know, university or for institutions when they want to take in women scientists, young women scientists, they tend to consider a little bit more when they tend to take like probably like, you know, the male researchers like, you know, way more compared to the other. So there's generally like, you know, a gender bias over here in all the process, like, you know, hiring process, review process for assigning like, you know, even assigning new research grants, filling in posts. There are even research being conducted that when you send out like, you know, to resume of like, you know, the same capability, same thing with different names, different gender, and the male generally like, you know, it's easier to get the position compared to female. So what is your thought about it? Like, you know, do we have policies already like, you know, to go against this, or do we need to work a little bit more on this?
Yeah, maybe one thing I could jump in with, and I don't know if it's much related to policy, but also diversity in the review panels and hiring committees themselves might make a difference. But also making more visible achievements done by women and other marginalized categories can alleviate those unconscious biases and stereotypes in the mind of hiring and recruitment panels and committees. I think the policy side is definitely a must as well, but I believe this is a delicate point where how can you really prove bias and hold accountable again reviewers and hiring committees? So that's I think again, at the risk of repeating myself, it's like a 3-level implementation strategy.
Okay, so probably like, you know, we have 1 more minute to wrap up. Anything else like, you know, you would like to add on, like, you know, we have not discussed? Actually, I still have a lot of questions. I do hope that like, you know, we can continue on like, you know, with the discussion, but I'm glad that at least like, you know, we kickstart like, you know, some of the discussion, and that we could actually bring this like, you know, to a different platform for discussion, and to really look into the gaps that needs to be filled. Other than having just like, you know, the policy at the ground level, implementation level, I think we really need to do a little bit more. So maybe just any last word?
Hi, can I have just
Sure.
one sentence? Yeah. As a woman scientist, researcher, we look forward for the institution or the system that can value us from both perspective, work and life, that can make that can value us as women scientists. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, maybe as conclusion words, I'd like to emphasize the point Nadia has made before, so that we need frameworks, we need policies, but that those also really have to be transformed into a lived culture. So that is a crucial point as well. And once more to just to emphasize or to highlight, I think that we also need to look at context-specific measures. So at which points, which measures can be successful should also be always considered. Thank you for
Yes.
the interesting
Thank
discussion.
you, Catherine. Yes. I do agree that we need a culture rather than like, all the hardcore statements within the policy just stay on the paper. So we need to do a little bit more. So Dr. O, anything? Our time is almost up.
No, I completely agree with what our colleagues here have addressed. Thank you, Chai.
Okay, thank you so much, for the wonderful sharing. And I do hope that, we have more opportunity, to actually continue this discussion. With that, thank you for giving me the floor and the opportunity to engage and interact with these wonderful women over here. Thank you so much. So the floor go back to you, Dr. Suzanne and Jen.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Chai. What a powerful discussion from all of you women. And indeed, that we have also learned a lot. We were commenting on the side, of all the things that we have really garnered from you, the key takeaways. So on one hand, we still know that there is underrepresentation in the fields of science and even in diplomacy. And it can be described as a loss of talent and also a waste of opportunities to make better decisions. And we've heard from you about intersectionality and inclusiveness. What I like very much was that apart from frameworks and policy, we have to have a dynamic culture. We have to really live it. But on the other hand as well, we have a phenomenon called evolution. There is this, the next decades, we will have the feminine being. And this presents a lot of opportunities. But women need to break the silence. We have to shatter glass ceilings, but we also have to certainly fix the leaky faucet. So thank you so much, Ambassador Ivona Piorco, Dr. Ann Pepa, Dr. Zorina Mokhtar, Dr. Nadia Metui, Associate Professor Dr. Nur Hafaiza Muhammad, Ms. Catherine Muller, Dr. Ora Kanoki Fanraksa, and of course, Dr. Chai, and to everybody who joined us. Susan, I'll move over to you to have your final thoughts. Thank you so much.
I can only echo you, Jenny. Fantastic panel, and we would be more than happy to continue this. I mean, of course, you can always do this in private, but we'd be delighted to have a part 2 of the discussion, because I think we're just only getting started on getting to the core of this. But once again, fantastic panel. Thank you so much to our hosts today, and we'll hope to see you all again very soon. Thank you so much.
Congratulations, Cher.
Thank you.
Dear colleagues, welcome back. Sawasdee Krap from Bangkok. I just want to have us please stand up and give a big round of applause for that last panel. Dr. Jen and everyone, give yourself a refresher. We're standing up for you. Thank you, colleagues. Online and in the room, that was phenomenal. So inspiring. And also to refresh us for this next conversation, because really that's the spirit of what we're doing next. So my name's Wes Teeter with UNESCO, and we are so excited to be here with you today. So stay with us online, because the idea of this session is brainstorming. There's no more PPTs after just this few slides that we're going to talk about the purpose of this session. We're going to talk about your ideas to kind of consolidate lessons learned. It's really going to be an interactive discussion with our panel here, and then we'll start to bring this energy to a focus and say, what are we going to do next? Does that sound good? All right, the room is ready. All right, so we're going to bring up the slide deck here, and I just wanted to go over a few points about the World Higher Education Conference, because somehow we have to channel your ideas and messages, which are so many. So we definitely want to try to capture those main ideas. So the World Higher Education Conference is a once-in-a-decade opportunity. The idea is every 10 years we come together as a global higher education community and talk about what we think is important. Everything you've been doing for the last 3 days has echoed that importance, and we want to make sure we capture that because it's needed now more than ever. Take a look at this slide, ladies and gentlemen. Does it look like we're on track to achieve the SDGs in Southeast Asia? right? We've heard a lot of emphasis on gender equality. We've heard a lot about climate action. We've heard a lot about quality education, but does that data say we're on track, right? So the reason we start there is because we want to promote this transformation of higher education, and partnerships are central to that purpose. So we can't leave here today without understanding that we are not on track yet. But this is the year for change. I have never seen this level of energy since 2015 when we announced the SDGs, and the global community was united around this purpose. This feeling in 2022 is a resurgence, is re-energizing to get us on track to achieve the SDGs. We have to do it. We have an evidence-based gap. We have lack of progress in many indicators. The challenges are many, but partnerships are the way forward, and higher education has a central role to play. So what's exciting about the World Higher Education Conference is that together, we're going to co-create a roadmap. So your consultation over the last 3 days, if you look on the logo, it says this is part of the World Higher Education consultation process. We're all feeding in to create this new roadmap together, right? And I hope you feel that. And what we're going to write together today, begin writing, is some of that commitment that will feed into a global action plan. But for me, what's most important is that what you feel. So I want to give you time today to think about what you feel, what individually, from the back of the room to the front of the room to all over, everyone listening, what individually can you contribute? What are you going to leave with from these last 3 days? And you're going to hear from our panelists as they reflect to how they want to contribute to that. These are some of the themes, and as I thought about which one we should emphasize on higher education partnerships, you're touching on so many, right? This has been an ambitious group. These are the 10 themes that will be discussed at the World Higher Education Conference. So we need to think about how our messages here today will contribute to these priorities, because that's what's going to make it into the action plan and roadmap. But they are cross-cutting, right? So take a look and we'll come back to that. So I just wanted to show you that you are on the map. Today we're in this discussion, which we know is an important step forward, but it is just part of the process. And we're not stopping at a World Higher Education Conference or later this year. We actually want to get to our goals, which is the Agenda 2030 and achieving that, right? So that's what that roadmap is showing, how this consultation is leading towards a bigger process of commitment and change. The youth platform. This is another co-creation opportunity. It's a learning opportunity, but also an opportunity to shape the messaging that will go into the World Higher Education Conference. So now is the time to engage and learn, to shape that space. The link is there. But really, this is about all of us, to create a new knowledge database. And I just pointed out one there, which is the knowledge-based clearinghouse. And so your consultation report from this discussion is going to go into that clearinghouse. So we want your messages online, friends online, for you to be able to send in your messages today and think about your priorities of what you want to be included, what you want to see as part of that consultation report. And then you'll be able to see yourselves, and including your name if you want, reflected in that clearinghouse. Does that sound good? Right? So everyone should feel like this is your space to co-create. So we're coming to the survey point, and everyone in the room and online, get ready to start writing. We're going to bring up a survey. I'm going to walk around with the microphone and interview each. No, I'm not going to do that. No. I will not interview each person and call up everyone on camera and put them on spot. No, this is really about reflection. Just taking time to reflect on what you see as the future role of higher education partnerships. Think about the gaps and challenges. Be forceful on this, ladies and gentlemen. Be forceful. We can't just say that what we've been doing is good enough. The language is, how are we going to transform higher education systems? So be bold. That's welcomed. We know we're off track. We know we have to work differently. So that's question 2. And number 3 is, well, practically, what are you going to do differently? Tell us. Write that down. And we're going to try to summarize that in a very interactive and exciting discussion, which I hope you will be very much a part of. So if we could bring up that survey, this would be the good chance to show it on screen. And just give us a minute as we shift gears, and we're going to actually show you what the survey looks like. We can put the link in the chat, and everyone at your computer in the room and online can start to read those questions and start to jot down 2 or 3 priorities per question. Just notes for yourself is fine. But I'm going to literally leave a break here, a few minutes, to gather your thoughts. Think about those questions and start writing. You can submit your survey now and just have a chance to reflect on your questions. There's the survey. So when you click in the chat box, you should have a link in the chat box now. Bring up that survey. I'm going to literally give you some time now to think and reflect before we start telling you what we've taken from these last 3 days together. So if everyone can get ready, this is the time to start taking notes. Look at that survey. Everyone in the room is welcome, because if it's not clear, tell us what's not clear, what your questions are. But start writing. I'll give you a few minutes to think about it, and then we'll come back with our panelists on stage for a discussion. So we're going to give you a good 3 to 4 minutes. So start writing, submit when you're ready, and we'll start the discussion in a few minutes. Personal commitment and ideas going forward. Sign your name at the bottom if you want to be part of the consultation report. So put your name in that survey if you want to be listed as part of this discussion. 1 or 2 more minutes. right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back and ready for our panel. I hope you had a chance to reflect, because I think that's really most important, is that all of us take this, commitment to heart and what we want to do going forward. So that's the spirit of this panel, is that we share our ideas, but really we want you to engage online as well. So stay there, commit online, share your ideas and questions, because we want to make this as interactive as possible as we push forward and think about our consultation report for the World Higher Education Conference. So with that, I'd like to welcome our guests online as well. We have Dr. Cholti. We have our colleagues and guests from who spoke earlier, Mr. Yi-Tang Lo. All right, welcome back. So good to see you. And Miss Satang is back as well. All of you did such a wonderful job. We're so glad you came back to join this reflection. We really hope you feel engaged as well. So feel free to throw in your ideas in the chat and we'll come back to you in turn. But I think what's going to happen, and feel free to jump in if you have questions from the audience or online, we can go question by question. So I'll ask the panelists, our question one, and we'll reflect for about 10, 15 minutes. And when we start to move into gaps and challenges, that will be the signal for question two. So we'll take about 10, 15 minutes each. Does that sound good? All right. So I'm going to start with, is that okay, Dr. Ramyan? We'll start with you on our first question about the future role of higher education partnerships. Dr. Ramyan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Wes. And I think the way we designed this policy dialogue is that we want it to be very interactive, and we really want to hear from you, and that's why we are putting us in the last session. So with that, I think I would like to capture and actually show you that we are actually listening, and we didn't even move from our chairs. So I think from day one, I think what is clear is that we have never been even close to achieving the SDGs. Actually, it's a very big gap to achieve the SDGs. So that's first that I can capture. Secondly, although we haven't actually been close to achieving the SDG, we have heard so many good practices and initiatives by various sectors. I think for the BC session yesterday, we saw that they are trying to do the research-based knowledge-driven initiatives, which is good. We heard this from ASEF as well. They are doing the same thing. Yet we also see that it's unfinished business. There are a long way to go, and we still continue doing that. Secondly, and I was really impressed, and this is the session that I'm impressed most, is actually we heard the voices of the youth. We want this policy dialogue to be really inclusive. So we heard from them that the programs that they have participated, either with EU Share or the ASEAN, the AUN, and AIMS, from Stimulus Right, they are very beneficial, but they also have requested us that actually the program should be expanded and more inclusive, massify, the benefits of that. So that's also what we heard. They also call for us to actually think about what does it mean by the sustainable region. And they said we need to have a common shared goals and vision so that we can actually work for one purpose of the sustainable region. We also learned from the private sector that higher education hasn't done enough to actually prepare our job-ready graduates. And in that, they also said that they are willing to work with us. We also learned that higher education system is still need to do a lot more on the gender EDI, and it's a prerequisite for any kind of development. And all in all, I think it has been emphasized from day one on that actually partnership is the key. But what it means by partnership, I think we also have to rethink about what it means by that. I think three things that I can kind of think a little bit further. One, what is the purpose of partnership? In the past, when we are doing higher education, we think about higher education for economic development or for social development. But now, with the COVID-19, with the challenges that we face, maybe we have to think further for sustainable development of the region and beyond. So that's the first one, why we are doing this partnership. Second, usually you are asking, who you are partnering with. In the past, you usually think about people with the same equal ranking as you are because of the research excellence, because of the of your academic excellence. But I think now we have to rethink who actually you are partnering with. Maybe it's more of the stakeholders, not just the private sector. Maybe we have to also think about the community. Maybe we have to think about the people with the knowledge, but it's not the formal conventional knowledge. Maybe it's the people with the local wisdom that also have to be included. And third, how do we actually do the partnerships? Maybe we have to be more innovative, more strategic, and more disruptive in the way we are creating the partnerships. So with that, I think we have to, at the end of the day, focus more on the impact of the partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ramyan. I feel like you touched on so many important points and that the online audience is going to want to reflect and join you. But I do want to pick up on your message about youth engagement and go straight to Sathang, if I can, invite her to share her thoughts on the last few days and what you think about the future role of higher education partnerships and how that touches your life individually or not and what we need to do about it. So thinking about the future role of higher education partnerships, can I pass to Ms. Sathang?
Hi. Thank you so much for inviting me again. This session on there, and I think this session is really interesting. So for the past few days, I think it's like a really eye-opening for me of how big this goal is. I mean, it's not like I don't already know it, and it's really important that I'm reminded. So for the partnership, I think the partnership between the stakeholder and the students will contribute an advantage to both parties. Firstly, I want to talk about the forms of partnership. So maybe the partnership can come in the form of stakeholders can give real world examples to the student, like lectures or special seminar. Or on the other ways around, the partnership can be in the form of capstone project or case competitions. To illustrate it more, how capstone project work is that one organization will come up with problems or questions and let university students as a group come together to find a solution and present the solutions. I think this type of partnership has gained popularity recently. Some master program has capstone project as their graduation project. And basically everywhere for the university student we have the case competitions. So I myself used to participated in case competition before. So me and my friend were grouping and we tried to solve the problem for the client, which is UNICEF at that time. And I think it's really good because I get to see what the real problem is and I get to come up with it. And for the stakeholder, like the UNICEF, they will also get a fresh idea from the students. I think this concept worked really well with SDG because SDG is not the solutions that will come solely from one group of people, but from different fields coming together to contribute with their own background. Also, I think it's something that you cannot just find a solution out of textbook. So you need an exposure to real world problems. So it will benefit both student and the firm that cooperate with. That would be my opinion.
Thank you so much, Sathang. I think it's a wonderful starting point and very practical. When you think about case examples, like how practically we can engage on the problems around the SDGs. I'm wondering if that's experienced for most people in the room or most learners. I think not. So how can we make that more accessible, more transformative for more learners, that type of practical insight on how we can build capacity through different fields and promote this coming together, as Sathang said. I'd love to go to Dr. Choltit, if I can, because your network, Dr. Choltit, is so key. The ASEAN University Network can really drive change in different working groups around this space. I'd love your thoughts on the future role of higher education partnerships. The floor is yours, Dr. Choltit.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Wesley. As Wesley mentioned, that the AUN is a kind of frontline implementation agency. So we approach this question from a very practical point of view. Starting with the numbers first, we are talking about the between 6,500 to 7,000 higher education institutions in Southeast Asian region. And this region, in terms of the higher education sector, has no consistency in terms of the academic quality, in terms of the citizen access to knowledge, in terms of the university and industry partnership, and in terms of the technological capability, particularly that are used in teaching and learning in the university, and not to mention the uneven development in the or the imbalance between how we implement lifelong learning. So for this question number 1, the AUN perspective is that we should concentrate the higher education partnership in a very particular field, aiming to create a kind of association culture, not only in among the academia, but also in terms of the university, industry, and community partnerships. So what it means in a concrete term is that instead of the government investment in creating a more cluster of association of universities or any clusters, it should invest in a very specific subject matter collaboration. In concrete term, meaning that government should invest in getting the researcher together regularly. That's my thought as of now. Thank you, Wesley.
Thank you, Dr. Choltis. I think that's an impressive point about the number of institutions and the potential you have to mobilize these associations and culture, but we can't do that alone. And I think the Secretariat here, Dr. Roger Chow, we're just so thrilled that you're here. At the policy level, we'd love your thoughts on the future role of higher education partnerships.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Wesley. I mirror the thoughts of Dr. Ramyan, our youth participant, and Dr. Choltis. And I also captured a lot of the key insights over the past 3 days. First and foremost, we know we are way out of track to achieving SDGs. That's a fact. It's also a fact that if we do business as usual, we will not achieve SDGs. So what is the future role of higher education and higher education partnerships? Higher education partnerships should be inclusive, equitable, and have a shared goal towards what is not only Industrial Revolution 4.0 or 5.0, but towards Society 4.0, 5.0, and so on. We have to look at higher education role and partnerships in building and including SDGs in its mission, strategic plans, implementation at the global, regional, national, and institutional level, and even to the individual stakeholder level. Next, we have to revisit the role of higher education, not only to focus on teaching, research, or engagement. In particular, when we talk about engagement, we have to be more inclusive, be broader, not just how we contribute to local communities, but how each and everyone, all stakeholders and partners, institutions of the higher education sector can contribute to making the world a better place. At the end of the day, each individual institution, individual stakeholder in higher education, institution, nation state, regions will have to collaborate, and hopefully in an inclusive, equitable manner, so that we we push forwards towards achieving SDGs and becoming peaceful, sustainable global community. Thank you. I hope it helps.
Very important starting point. And if I walked around the room, would everyone follow our conversation so far? Yes? Great. If we're too technical or off point, that's not the messaging that will resonate globally, I promise you. So if it's not clear online, ask questions and engage, because I think this has to be the point where the issues that we're talking about have to speak to a very public audience. So thank you for these clear messages about equity.
Just one point.
Sure.
The other point is we all have to listen to each other when we revisit the role of the higher education sector, covering all sectors. So when we have to revisit the role of the higher education sector in contribution to society, to the better good. And that's basically, I forgot to mention that earlier.
Certainly some active listening in the last few days. I really appreciate that point and how we co-create and construct. And as you see, our colleague Philip over here is co-creating and listening and writing as we speak. And this will be anonymized by the end so that your contributions will be part of this listening exercise and co-creation exercise. But I'd love to go to Li Tan Lo and our colleague and friend online to say, does this resonate with your life, the future role of higher education partnerships? Does this resonate with you so far? And passing the floor.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Wesley. So for me, the partnership will be, for now, like we are somehow you say can off track of the SDG developments, including the partnership programs, and now we are doing the SDG programs on how to say, just for me it's like one university just do for what their own thing, then they don't have the collaborations between one another. Even one, if have only specified in 1 to 2 SDG. For myself, I think the future role of the higher education's partnership will be, can have one university can have one group of the people that working on the one SDG. So one university will have 17 SDG ongoing. Then after that, we can have more collaborations with all other universities, including the industrial partnership and also the personal partnership. So for now, as we concern SDG for quality for education is always the meant to evaluate for all sustainable development goals. So university plays a very important role in these partnership programs for these sustainable development goals. So for me, we can have more partnership in terms of with the stakeholders. Stakeholders not only means the public and private, it's also local community and international community, and then have the more international organization join us in the sustainable development goals. In the terms of United States, we still have 8 years to go, but somehow we still off track of the sustainable development goals. So it's time for us to gather together and make more partnerships, share the knowledge, and make it successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Li Tan Lo, and thank you also for joining. I know you're making an extraordinary effort to be with us here today. We're really excited to have your voice come through because a lot of institutions do their own thing. I think the spirit of partnerships is that we have to overcome this tendency to isolate. And even though there are research partnerships, but one group that's done a really good job of bringing us together, I think, is EU Share. So I'd love to go to Darren next to think about the future role of higher education partnerships, question 1. And then to the audience, if you have questions, please feel free.
Thanks very much, Wesley, and thank you all for joining us with our partners at this session. I think it's been a really nice opportunity, and just to echo Wesley's words, there is a palpable sense of energy and activity that now in 2022, now that people can gather together again and discuss formally, informally, off to the side over coffee, etc., there's an awful lot to be done, and a great willingness to collaborate on finding solutions to the problems that we face within our own institutions, within our own organizations, but society and the world at large. Yes, we are quite far away from reaching the Sustainable Development Goals with just under 8 years to go. But I think we're probably more ready to act than ever before. And that's certainly the case within the higher education sector. The SHARE program since 2015 has focused very much on the context of internationalization of higher education in Southeast Asia. And that at times has focused very much on the institutions, the curricula, developing partnerships within the institutions. But we are increasingly seeing that institutions want to go beyond institution to institution partnerships, and they want to develop partnerships with industry, civil society, and any number of organizations that can help us achieve and move towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So over the last few days, we've heard excellent evidence and examples of international partnerships of this nature that are doing great work in approaching and maximizing the impact of initiatives. We do hope that, well, we are one example of many such conferences and many such activities taking place around the world. We've seen that there have been significant initiatives by the UN Academic Impact, for example, in setting up SDG hubs. We have the examples in Europe of the European Universities initiatives. And these are consistently looking beyond institutional concerns at wider concerns of society. So the SDGs are multidisciplinary in nature, as are universities, and we need multidisciplinary teams, multidisciplinary activities to make more of an impact. We need networks and coalitions of universities, private sector organizations, and civil society to convene. And we use the expression communities of practice quite a lot in the SHARE program. And I think that's what we're seeing across society at large. And students being active participants in this as well. So it's not only about the organizations and I suppose the senior leaders of organizations having these conversations. It concerns everyone. It's a cross-cutting concern. And perhaps the pandemic, as terrible as it's been, has taught us that what affects one country or a number of countries can pretty soon affect all of us. And climate change and the dangers of that are an even greater concern. So I'm looking forward to seeing many more fora like this, many more discussions, and we're delighted that we can work with our partners across Southeast Asia and further afield on these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. And I'm really happy that we can't do it all online. Wouldn't the world be a sad place if just emailing each other or texting were enough? You know, the fact that we're together, the fact that we have this potential to come back together to build these relationships and to really feel that we can, you know, achieve our goals together. Thank you, Darren. And I agree the community of practice is going to be an exciting way to actualize those words. Dr. Jenny online, thank you for your question. I'm just going to read it out, but I'd love to hear from the floor as well before we move on to question 2. And I think Dr. Choltit, I'll come to you next on this question 2. I think you'd have a lot to say. So Dr. Jenny, thank you for your comment. Another suggestion would be to co-create a review of research assessment, also on how to achieve synergies between the HEIs and the research and innovation infrastructures and policies, programs, and practice. The question to answer would be, how do we better connect, monitor, and transform to respond to the challenges and reach the SDGs? And I think that's a perfect transition into Q2, which is about these gaps and challenges. So with that, Dr. Choltit, I'd love you to reflect on the question and also your thoughts as we start to create this dialogue and push forward. Dr. Choltit?
Right. Thank you for the question. My short answer is that investment in the capacity building for the researcher, particularly those who are working in the field that support the promotion of SDG. I'm picking up from what Darren said, that it should be a multidisciplinary research program and invest in that. link up with agency like Euraccess that you already heard from them previous day. That's my short answer, which is investment in a very particular field of researcher and researching group. Thank you.
Great. Any other challenges that you'd like to add in terms of this question too? Main challenges and gaps, or would you put research at the top of that agenda?
Question number 2 is about the gaps. There are so many gaps. I like to bring up only 3 for this round. Number 1 is the gap in how we assist the education of our young people to be a global job ready citizen with a lifelong learning mindset and practices. Is still a huge gap in this area. Secondly, access to knowledge. Even though there's a lot of talk about bringing in kind of technology assist or technology enhanced or even open access, but still in our region, still the gap in terms of our citizen access to knowledge. Thirdly and lastly is about the gap in the quality standard. Back to the number again. SHARE program put the number as 7,000 plus universities in Southeast Asia. There's still a huge gap in terms of the quality of learning and teaching and also the quality of research. Okay, back to you, Wesley.
Thank you, Dr. Cholti. And I'm still stuck on this first point of invest, right? This need to invest in our priorities. I just want to check with our dedicated team over here. Philip Masterson is doing a wonderful job scribing and keeping up with your ideas. Philip, are we doing okay on that key point? Yes, we got it. Great. And Satang, I'd love to pass to you about Q2, these gaps and challenges and how they impact your life. Can I pass to you, Satang?
Yes, hi. So for me, one of the challenges that I would like to bring up would be the practicality of the partnership. So if I were to link to my prior answer about the cooperation to create a case competition or the project to work together, I think that if it's the product of the student, it might not be practical enough because to make it practical, one needs to really understand the condition, the constraint of the situations and of the problems, which can only be found in the real players in the industry, unfortunately. Also, I think that it takes quite a long time to make the partnership work. So continuity could also be another challenges. If, for example, the partnership between the university and the stakeholders between the student and the stakeholders. So student will only stay in the university for like maximum 4 years. So some partnership might take longer than that, and then it will lack continuity if one cannot transfer this to another one smoothly. So to conclude, I think it would be 2 challenges: the quality assurance and the continuity. And what these 2 challenges can lead to would be the reluctance of the stakeholder to cooperate with the university. So say if you look in the point of view of private sectors and you ask them, okay, let's partner up and you give me your problems and we'll help coming up with solutions. But then they will think, what if it's not practical enough? So they might not decide to participate, or if they did, they might be reluctant to give full support and the information that the student would need. Therefore, it would be quite a waste of time for both parties. So I think this can also lead to another challenges is the commitment. So all of us are here with great intentions, inspirations, but because this is a really big goal and it takes a lot of time, so I think this is something we need to consider. I hope I'm not too pessimistic for you all. Yeah, but that
This
would
is
be my
Q2.
now.
Tang, that was wonderful. And we have Q3 because that's exactly what we want, is to think about what we can do differently. But I know your key points about the quality assurance concerns, the continuity of learning, and the commitment. Those are core issues because when you look at that and this reluctance of cooperation, so fundamental. And Philip, I hope we capture that. We can't just be so idealistic that we think, of course, we'll be welcomed with our ideas, but how can we be practical and deliver these solutions? And I'm sure, Dr. Ramyan, you have a lot to say on this point. Let me pass to you.
Thank you very much. Actually, with this point, I want to go back yesterday in one of the research that has been presented on the earlier session. Actually, they were talking about the gender EDI, and they said that one of the challenge is that there is a lack of structure. Lacking of structure might be a little difficult, or maybe we put it other way. If we have a structure, the partnership can be happening easier, so to speak. So I think the structure is very important. And with the structure, we probably need to have a common understanding and a shared vision and shared goals. And even with that, the earlier session today already showed that even when you have a policy, it doesn't really mean that you agree, you understand that the policy is there. It will not be evaporated because lots of times you have policy, but it's evaporated. So it's not being put into practice or being put into action. So I think that's one thing that is still lacking. So maybe this is something that we wanted to do on the regional level as well for us, because we are also working in various areas, and it's not that structure, but structures, because there are so many structures that we have to address on. So that's one. Secondly, even we have the partnership already, the question is, how do we make sure that that partnership is inclusive? Just be realistic and reflect on the 3 days. How many times you heard about the projects you're working with Myanmar? You're working with Laos? You're working with Cambodia? Lots of times you hear a lot of projects emphasizing, working with Singapore, working with Malaysia, working with Thailand. I don't mean to be divisive or anything, but that's just the reality. Although we are trying very hard when we are putting up the program to think about this in a more inclusive way, but that is actually probably reflecting the reality of this region. That maybe something is missing there, and how can we actually make it really truly inclusive? Or there is a more precondition to make it inclusive. Third, how do we make it equitable? Actually, your question yesterday was really important. What if there is a financial aspect involved? And it's not everybody who can contribute into the with the finance. How can we still make that partnership equitable? When there is a financial aspect included. So I think I will stop there for now. But I would, hand it back to you.
Great. I'm going to go to Li Teng Lo next, but I also want to check with the audience here. If you have questions, feel free to raise your hand and we'll bring you a mic so that you feel as much included as the online guests who are submitting great questions. I think this is really fundamental. We're getting into these core challenges. Yi Teng, can I pass to you and see if this resonates with you? Question 2.
All right. Thank you, Doctor. So for me, actually, I want to go back to the origin first before the partnership, where for the university is that we have enough knowledge on the SDG, because people always say, oh, we want to have the SDG and go for collaborations with peoples and go for collaboration with university, but then they they really know what is SDG, what is sustainable development goals, what is the goals about, what is the each goal, what is the target, what is the indicator. So this is the first thing that we want to think about for the before we start our partnership, because when we can have the general introduction or briefing about the SDG, but then if we don't go in deep, we cannot do anything. The things that we do, we cannot match to the indicator. Then it will be like in the gray zone there. So when we have the clear when we have the clear SDG meanings and we understand what is the indicators, what is the opinions, what is the all the components, then we continue with the partnership. Then let the students know about SDG. Then for now, maybe you can ask or the university student, most of them will know, oh, I know SDG will be Sustainable Development Goals. But then when you ask more deeper, it will be like, like they will just like, I don't know, I'm not sure, I'm not sure about that kind of things. So for that one will be my first challenge. Then the second will the mutual benefits. The mutual benefits will lead to the partnership programs. So but all the partnership can be done or done completely when a letter of intent or memorandum of understanding is signed. So but then some partnership is like they just keep arguing when they don't have the mutual benefits. So for me, when we go for the challenge, we can have the all the university can have the same missions or opinions where we want to focus on the SDG. So the MOU, LOI can easily be signed, then can have more partnership for that. Then the third will be same with the Dr. Chaltis, which is the investment or the funding. So everything need money, including the partnership, including every indicators that we do, we need money. So how is the money comes for the economic crisis? Now, especially in this pandemic, then how it will be the hard day for us to get the money, to get the funds, to continue our projects. So that one will be another gap for from me. Okay, thank you.
Great points. Thank you so much about how ready we are for these partnerships, how informed we are about the SDGs. I want to pass to Darren, who has additional points, I'm sure. Q2, Darren?
Well, I just really wanted to say what an excellent first point that was about the knowledge gap that exists in society within higher education institutions. I think, as a program, the SHARE program has spent a long time talking to institutions about developing strategies to help their internationalization. And one of the key principles of an internationalization strategy is that it must be relevant to your own context. You know, it must have meaning where the institution is, how it addresses society. Do institutions, higher education institutions, have an SDG strategy? Do each of them have that? Is it relevant to their own context? So I'd just like to say that Yitang's points are excellent, and we need to think about this in a comprehensive way at an institutional level, and that will then pay dividends and have an impact in the wider society.
Great points, and I'd love to pass to Dr. Roger Chow to see if you agree or where you think we need to take things further. What are some of the challenges from your view?
Well, a lot of points are on the dot, but I think 2 or 3 points are missing on the discussion in terms of gaps and challenges. First is higher education institutions and higher education stakeholders are located within a power structure where agendas, directions, research funding are directed towards key teams, key areas, key disciplines. This has to change. We have to have a common understanding of where we want society to move forward in 2030, 2050, and so on. How do we see humanity or the world in the next 20 years, 50 years? One of the things I've always hinted is that social infrastructure has been developing so much slower compared to economic and even political infrastructure. We need to develop social infrastructure so it comes up to at least at par or closer to the development of economic and political infrastructure, so that we have the foundations of the global community, so that when there's an earthquake or disasters, we manage to survive. We're talking about building humanity. We're talking about building a community. So where does higher education partnerships come in? We need to understand what is the goal and basically have a common language. The problem there is we need to discuss and have a consensus of who we are going to be partnering for and where we want to go and how we are going to move forward. It's a bit abstract because I cannot go very specific because it's a bit complicated. Next is institutional autonomy. We're talking of funding. We're talking of partnerships. A lot of the good practices in research partnerships now talks about mutual benefits, which was discussed earlier. Talks about inclusion, equitable partnerships with mutual benefits. And basically, I think yesterday there was a talk of feedbacking to the stakeholders, which are things that needs to be addressed in terms of when we're talking of human higher education partnerships. If we put these things in mind, then higher education partnerships will be stronger and become more effective and essentially sustainable. Last point is that in my experience and observations over the past 10 to 15 years, in terms of development projects, member states tend to be more dependent on external funding and external project capacity building and technical assistance. There needs to be enhanced confidence in their capacity to actually implement and sustain good projects, translating initial projects towards national or even regional initiatives, which becomes sustainable practices at higher education or even other sectors. So these 3 points, I think, are the gaps which were missed. Thank you.
Tremendously important points. Thank you, Roger. And I'd love to pass to Leighton if he has a question from the floor. And we welcome more questions. I'm going to read from our comments in a minute, but I want to pass to Leighton, and then I'll go to the online comments before we move to our next question. Comments from the floor are welcome if you'd like to come to the podium.
Thanks, Wesley, and everybody. One of the gaps that I was wondering about that came up in yesterday's session on the NDGs and partnerships was around just the gap in data. We were talking about how the indicators themselves feel valid, but how much do we think the gap in data might be hurting us, and also the understanding? Just a thought.
I think it's a great question, and I'd love to pass to the panel if anyone wants to be daring, but UNESCO definitely has points to say on this as well. Can I pass to Roger first?
Well, thank you for bringing it up. We were talking about it earlier, and we totally forgot about it. Big mistake. Evidence-based policymaking, evidence-based research, evidence-based actions need to be driven by data. Okay, very key point. But it needs to be comparable, it needs to be verifiable, and it needs to be accurate. How do we do these things? So there's significant work that needs to be done. UNESCO, UIS, the World Bank, ADB, OECD, everyone's working on it. But unfortunately, it's still lacking. And how do we drive action towards SDGs? We basically need data to support actions and policy development. Thank you very much for bringing that up.
Indeed. Dr. Ramyan?
Yes, I just want to add one thing. Although you say comparable, there are some other things that needs to be culturally context as well. So we have to make sure that the data that we collected be concerned about the culture differences. That's one. Secondly, I hope that the SDGs has been used as a reference, but at the same time, we have to think about the qualitative side of it as well. Some of the universities does have their SDGs, and it's more like a tick box, and we shouldn't really do that. We should really, what Yi-Ting said, we should really understand what it actually means and how it is related to our own life and the ecosystem that we are living in. Yeah. And relevance.
Indeed, this culturally relevant piece is critical because the SDGs are national indicators, they're national targets. This is not going to resonate with individual learners per se, but the topic is very big. So actually, UNESCO is not responsible for generating that data. So we need to look to our individual member states, our individual authorities, and find out where the data gaps are. You can find this information. We'll send you the link, but it's on SCAP, the UN SCAP for Asia Pacific. It's in the slides that we'll share. You can click on that link and you can see where the gaps are. But we need to go beyond that. These national level indicators are not going to make you feel great at night alone. It's not enough. Great. Well, Philip, I hope we're not speaking too quickly here. You're okay with main themes. Philip's doing a great job over here because the data, Roger got really excited there with the evidence-based policymaking, because I think that's going to be how we measure change. In the back, everyone feeling okay? Are we too abstract? Are we off point? Any other comments are welcome before we start to move on. Darren.
If I may, Wesley, I mean, I think what we've seen in this session, in the policy dialogues, is large regional organizations coming together, sharing information, sharing strategies. And that is, I think, a very good step forward towards building more consensus and more of an understanding of what the SDGs mean to us in our own context, but also in the wider regions that we operate in. I mean, it is a much more regional world we live in now. And we need regions to then come together in the same way that ASEAN has, Southeast Asia has, Europe has, and share those contexts amongst each other. Southeast Asia can play a really strong role in the rest of the world in talking about how to come together as a region and then share best practice across very different cultures, completely different experiences if we look at the diversity within the region. But then, that's very true of any region. So the knowledge gap that exists can be addressed with the tools that we have at our disposal. But it still fundamentally requires people to sit down and make decisions about what is important and what we need to highlight.
Great. We're going to start pushing to a close. Let me just read this one. Okay, quick over
Can
to
I add
Roger, and then we'll read.
quick word
Dr.
in terms of data? Transparency. So transparency allows everyone to understand how it's collected, basically, or the quality of data and something, so that everyone can actually just plug in and see how to use the data to improve policy making and action towards SDGs.
Indeed critical. And we have a lot more to say on this topic for Q2, and that's really what we want to reflect, is not only we're doing great and pat ourselves on the back, but really reflect these underlying challenges, what's prevented us, why we are stuck at this point. We're pushing to the end of our session, ladies and gentlemen, but I did want to read Dr. Jenny's point. In the last session on women in science and research, the consensus was that more than policy, we have to look at dynamic cultures in the same way we push for inclusiveness. We should also look at efforts such as citizen science and community engagement. For me, that speaks to this need to transform higher education, to really think about beyond the classroom type opportunities. So really a good point, and I think it speaks to what we're talking about for question number 3. We're coming to the end of our policy dialogue, ladies and gentlemen, so now is the time to put your comments in the chat, raise your voice, because we're documenting this now, but I want to push to our final question for the panel in our audience. So what do you think needs to change? What do we have to do? What do we have to create to address these challenges within institutions and to make the change we want to see in our broader society? So what needs to change or be created? I didn't give anyone a heads up. Does anyone feel ambitious? Dr. Choltis, how are you? Can I pass? All right, let me start with Dr. Choltis, if he's okay.
Right. Thank you, Wesley. Again, investment need to change. Invest in, for example, we have a question on the screen that the role of women in science. Many years ago, I got involved in the a program to assist our women academia to do more research, equip them with more research skills in women's studies or any topics related to gender equality, those stuff. We found out that many of the young female researchers are still in need of a kind of a methodology. For example, when I discuss with those senior researchers, they mentioned that when we talk about, for example, feminist methodology, it is a very specific worldview and methods. These things need to be trained, need to create the skills for the researcher. But at that time, we found out that a lot of young researchers still lack those skills, particularly in terms of the methodology. So my point is always investment in the researchers. If we want to create a kind of quality and standards in the higher education in ASEAN. Back to you, Wesley. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Choltit. You have a gift to make something very large sound achievable, that we can work to engage young researchers, invest in researchers. That feels tangible. It feels relevant for higher education partnerships. And I think that's going to give us a starting point on the change needed to go forward. Satang, can I pass to you to see what your thoughts are on question 3, the change and ideas that you think need to be created? Over to you, Satang.
So for me, the things that I wanted to change is inclusivity. Inclusivity because it's a very complex problem stemming from deeper problems like inequality or education quality or even household domestic violence. So what do I mean with inclusivity? For example, I saw in the news 1.2 million students in Thailand is left out from the education system. So I can only imagine how many other kids in other areas were left out. But then we need to ask ourselves why? Why were they left out? There are many aspects to it actually. To give it an example in a broader ways, it could be in supply and demand. Supply is in quality and quantity of the school to ensure that we not only have enough seat for the student, but also the variety of the course. Because some kids actually choose not to enter the school because they think that the curriculum doesn't fit them. I think this is something that the authorities or us, the policymaker, can work on, but there are also the social norms. I'm not sure for other countries, but for Thailand, people usually look down on vocational students. So some who might really want to study that may choose not to, but also they won't go into the academic way. So I think we need to make all of the field of the educations equal and realize the importance of all the field, not just give the importance to, I'm sorry to say this, but the doctor, the lawyers and such. And also if we look from the demand side, well, there are tons of kids who want to study but they cannot afford it. Not only for the financial problems, but also come from family issues. I believe in some areas they choose not to send the kids to school because they think that it's better to go out and work and earn the money. So I think the importance of education and how it can generate a long-lasting impact should be reminded and demonstrated clearly to them. So for me in general, it's just that there are so many problems of inclusivity. But why inclusivity is important? I think it's because education should not be a choice or should be a choice because it's the foundation of almost everything in the world from personal growth to a global level growth. I believe none of us would be here if we don't have a proper chance to access to education. So it should be accessible to all, regardless of their ages, income, sexuality, and race, and also having a variety so that everyone can learn what they want. And I think that education, in the end, is the tool that someone can use to change their social status, to change the world. So if I have a magic wand, that would be one thing I would like to change. Thank you.
It's very powerful. Thank you so much. Let me pass to Dr. Ramyan, then I'll go to the floor, but I also want to bring back in Yiteng Lo as well.
Thank you very much, Wes. And I'm trying to address this question from senior right-hand perspective. And as the regional organization, and we positioning ourselves as a partner for higher education, we thought, we think that the lacking of the structures on the regional level is very important. And actually the idea of common space, creating the common space for higher education as a framework, that the region could work together, has been proposed since 2007 by Ajahn Supachai Yawaprapat, who was the former center director. And you probably have known him, and he has done a lot for the region. And Roger, you want to say his quote, so I leave the quote for you. Okay, that's a very interesting quote. But you can see this relationship that we are trying to move closer together. I mean, Simo Right and also ASEAN EYSD, we thought that, with the structures on the regional levels, common understanding, common goals, and make it very inclusive, so that everything that we do is relevant to their own priority areas for the regions, taking into consideration as well of the differences of the different countries. I think that would be good. This common space of higher education would be a framework that we would work together. And I know that, ASEAN EYSD also have your own plan. We also have our own plan. We also have the agenda. But at the end of the day, we should look for the maximized impact for the region. And I think that's the most important thing. So that's one. Secondly, we should see this as a collective intelligence. I think the past 3 days has been cleared. If we are sitting on our own office, we wouldn't have this much information and knowledge. Actually, yesterday we were joking to each other, do you have this data? And he said, no. Do you have this data? I said, no. And you said, no, UNESCO has it. So we said, we have to do something together. Something like this is the way forward. It's a true partnership that we have to do. Third, we have to disrupt how we do things. Because if what we have done has been working, it would work, right? But it hasn't been working, so we have to disrupt ourselves. For example, the exchange programs that we are, hosting is AIMS, the Asian International Mobility for Students program. We are trying to co-create programs so that it collapse all the discipline. It will be multidisciplinary. And we are hoping to actually co-create this. When we are saying co-create, it's very complicated, because when we are talking to the people to ask them to be our partner, they usually are very confused. What we are trying to do is that instead of us designing the program, we are sitting down together and co-create this program. So when we say we are talking about the alumni, they're actually the current students, the educational technology people, the one who have the digital knowledge, the people who are working in the area of SDGs, the people who are the expert in internationalization. So we try to be as inclusive as much as possible, so that the program that we have created actually is relevant to the future learners, and it will be a future proof as well. So third is actually disrupt. And we should be, if you look at the 2 years, the people who survive is just actually startup. But startup, they do fail. But we should, as the higher education sector, usually we don't want to fail. But I think we should embrace the failure, because it's part of the growth. So even when we try this CU mobility, even we fail, we can try it again, because nobody actually knows what is the right model. So I think that's the two things I want to share.
Really important. And I know, Roger, you want to speak. Can I come back to you after Yiteng Lo? Okay. And I'm going to bring you in, Yiteng Lo. If I could bring you in and share your thoughts on this change that need to be created. Is this resonating with you? What do you think in the context of your life and perspective? Yiteng? He might have dropped. Roger gets his chance. No, he's back. All right. Yiteng Lo, thank you again. Question 3, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sorry, because the internet connection is not stable here. So for me, if I have a magic wand, the things that I want to change is I want to improve the awareness of students towards our sustainable development goals, so that we can have more partnerships can be done. And furthermore, we can have one lifelong learning system where the students can learn the elective based on their preference. Also, they learn from the sustainable development goals. SDG is very wide field, is very large. So we can the students can get information or study from each of the field or each subfield of the SDG. So that we can have more professions on the specific field. So it can help us collectively more easier to achieve our SDG goals in 2030. So one last question will be SDG taught us to make this world sustain. But are we really aware on what is happening now? So it will be a, a small thoughts for us to think how to continue to develop, how to change our world to become more sustainable. That's all from me. Thank you.
Very powerful again. Thank you so much, Yitin Lo. And how do we improve our awareness? And I know Roger wants to come in with your comments that will bring us to a close. We're coming to our time.
Well, it's nice to be the last because everyone said something important, and each one of you mentioned something that was I was going to say. Invest, inclusiveness, partnerships, understanding, disruption, all these things, and actually translating ideas to implementation, not just political commitment, but actual implementation. Okay, let me be disruptive. First and foremost, everyone has been talking about higher education and education in general to be a public good. But what are we actually treating education as a public good? The investments, take note, the investment to education to everyone actually translate to social capital and contributes back to society. Inclusiveness, everyone should have the option and the opportunity to study and enhance learning, acquire skills and competencies that they need and they desire, not directed by agendas or disciplines or by the job market. Okay. Partnerships, everyone, we talk about inclusiveness and equitable partnerships. We also need to talk about understanding and getting towards a common language and a common goal. Right, Simio Raihead, AUN, SHARE, I forgot myself. Okay, EYSD, ASEAN Secretariat, and UNESCO are all here, including our partners from Asia Europe Foundation, Euralex, everyone. We are all stakeholders. We are here together, but we have our own initiatives, our own understanding. The need towards developing a common understanding and a common goal is still there. This is something disruptive. Our last speaker talked about lifelong learning, and that was one of the points I wanted to highlight. We need to be disruptive. The concept of lifelong education and lifelong learning has been there for what? 40 years, even more. But have we actually looked into it? Have we looked at alternative pathways? We talk about it. We talk about flexible learning. We talk about recognition of prior learning. Has it been implemented to a wider range? There are examples to a very small extent. But we have to understand that skills, competencies are learned at formal, informal, and non-formal sectors. And that it is also a personal commitment and a personal desire for people to actually learn. Even if you don't go to school, you learn something. So at the end of the day, I would like to put on the table that people try to look at how we view education and higher education. That we look at general competencies and skills that actually transcends disciplines and transcends industrial revolutions. Skills that empowers learners, future leaders, the youth, policymakers to become flexible and adaptable, and that they can understand what needs to be done in different time frames, regions, so that we actually are capable of learning and enhancing, translating knowledge production to actual application to make a difference in society. Last but not the least, we have to understand that we live in a very complex world order. We have, if we're talking of higher education and higher education partnerships, we need to empower our higher education institutions and stakeholders to be more flexible so that they can actually contribute. Of course, they need to be socially responsible and accountable to the different stakeholders. But then, if they are not empowered and they don't have the flexibility, how are they going to move forward? Then basically they are trapped in a cage, limited to what they can contribute towards achieving SDGs. I hope my thoughts were not too much or too heavy or too abstract, but I thought that it was worth putting these things on the table. Thank you.
Indeed, you challenge us and push us forward, and I think this is a perfect point to not close on forever, but to say where we are at this point in time and what we will do going forward. I'd love to pass to Darren for his closing remark, and just to say our thanks from all for your contributions today.
Well, let me echo that thanks as well, and thanks to our partners for their trust, for agreeing to actively participate and contribute so meaningfully to this last 3 days. All of the participants, everyone who wished to be in the same room again and have conversations that are pushing us forward. So we're really looking forward to continuing the conversation and bringing these points and the points that were made online and in the room forward to the World Higher Education Conference in 2022. I'd like to thank Wesley and UNESCO for providing that opportunity, and we'll be approaching that conference together as a region, EYSD, CEMEA RIHEAD, ASEAN University Network, SHARE, and our regional partners. So it's a very exciting time for us.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's a big round of applause for our hosts and partners at EU Share and CEMEA RIHEAD and the ASEAN Secretariat, and all of our colleagues online. Dr. Choltit, thank you, at AUN, and our youth speakers. Wonderful job. And I believe that is the closing of our session here today, if I'm not mistaken.
You need to mention
a new beginning.
We informally decided to, before we close, CEMEA RIHEAD, EYSD, ASEAN Secretariat, AUN, EU Share, UNESCO informally agreed to work together to make higher education in ASEAN and beyond better. So we are putting our heads, resources, and capacities together. So this is one form of getting higher education partnerships to work and move together, and hopefully also contribute to South-South and North-South and South-South-North partnerships and learning, which we forgot to mention during the session. Thank you very much.